Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 16 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Let's dive into the video. After Tangjin walked out of the main city, he beckoned to the shadow beside him. A Holy Dragon City cultivator in black leather armor appeared in front of him and bowed slightly. Call a few guards and we'll go to the commercial district to catch him. In fact, ever since the Iron Dragon mercenary group entered Holy Dragon City, they had already been monitored. This was also the reason why Tangjin knew that Xiaoying was from the Iron Dragon mercenary group after seeing her. Every team and cultivator who entered the Holy Dragon City would be screened by the Holy Dragon City's spies. The Holy Dragon City would pay special attention to those individuals and teams who were more dangerous. On the mountains around the Holy Dragon City, dozens of people used military binoculars and walkie-talkies to report the movements of dangerous targets every day. The Holy Dragon City's secret agents disguised as wanderers and merchants would also monitor these dangerous people at close range. It was not an easy task to maintain the stability of such a large commercial district in the world of Luqing. Not long after, 6 black-robed cultivators appeared behind Tangjin. Each of them was unusually silent. How did Imo Yun and Qianlong train you guys? It's only been a few days, and you've all become like ghosts? Tangjin looked at the cultivators behind him and sighed. He took the lead and walked toward the commercial district. When they arrived at the inner city wall, there were already city guards who had opened the city gate and were waiting for Tangjin to go over. The strong man in charge of the City Defense Legion walked to Tangjin with an embarrassed expression. Tangjin swept his eyes over the other party and coldly said, "The next time something like this happens, you'll be in charge of those one-horned race captives, understand?" The brawny man's face twitched when he heard this. He cupped his hands together and bowed to Tangjin before roaring, "Please rest assured, City Lord. Next time, no one will slip in." Tangjin suddenly laughed out loud when he saw the strong man's nervous expression. He hammered the strong man's shoulder. "Don't be so nervous. I don't care if someone sneaks in. Otherwise, I would have raised the wall a long time ago and let them see the wall and be at their wits' end." Tangjin smiled as he walked out from the city gate. He was also considering whether he should raise the inner city wall by another level. To Tangjin, this was something that could be done in minutes and could be done at any time. When they arrived at the entrance of the commercial district, the guard on duty immediately used the walkie-talkie to inform Xiao Rui after seeing Tangjin. Not long after, Xiao Rui led more than 20 people and ran over. "City Lord, what's going on?" Little Rui bowed to Tangjin and carefully asked. "There's a problem with a group of people here, and one of them is an expert. I'm afraid you can't handle him, so I'm going there myself." After the other guards left, Tangjin brought Xiao Rui and the others to the cave where the Iron Dragon mercenary group was located. At this moment, not a single member of the Iron Dragon mercenary group was resting. After Tangjin entered the cave, they immediately jumped up from the ground and looked at Tangjin and the others with a face of caution. However, when they noticed the cultivation of Tangjin and the others, they were all shocked. Other than Tangjin's unfathomable cultivation, none of the black-robed cultivators behind him were simple characters. Once they fought, it would definitely be a tragic battle. Tai Long took a deep breath and walked in front of Tangjin, bowing. Iron Dragon mercenary group's leader Iron Dragon pays his respects to the City Lord. From the first time he saw Tangjin, Tai Long knew that something had happened to Xiaoying. And NBSP, Tangjin's Lord-class aura also allowed Tai Long to confirm his identity. Lightly nodding his head, Tangjin expressionlessly asked Tai Long, "Tell me, what are you doing in Holy Dragon City?" Tai Long hesitated for a moment and decided to tell the truth. There was nothing to hide about this kind of thing. Instead of being suspicious, it was better to tell the truth. Tangjin's brows furrowed when he learned that Tai Long had accepted a mercenary mission to search for the Moonlight Pebble in the Holy Dragon City. The elves hadn't thought of searching for the moonlight pebbles for decades, so why were they looking for them now? What were they planning? No matter what the elves were up to, there was no way he could hand over the moonlight pebble now that it was in his hands. Tangjin had never given up on collecting the moon spring water from the elf clan. Tangjin was even planning to steal a portion of moon spring water from the elf capital city when his cultivation level was higher. Find EU chapters on nv/lbi.com. After understanding the intentions of the Iron Dragon mercenary group, Tangjin didn't have the intention to capture them. Instead, he asked Iron Dragon about the other buildings. It turned out that Tai Long came from a grade 7 city called White Tiger City, one of the human cities near Heaven Battling City. Perhaps this Heaven Battling City really had some connection with the original world, because in addition to the White Tiger City, there were 3 more level 7 towers near the Heaven Battling City, namely the Azure Dragon City, the Vermilion Bird City, and the Black Tortoise City. The 4 towers were all led by Heaven Battling City, and were collectively called Four Symbols City. There was also a master who had once mentioned that there was a strange connection between Four Symbols City and Heaven Battling City, and it was definitely not as simple as relying on each other. The Iron Dragon mercenary group was just an ordinary mercenary group in the White Tiger City. Other than accepting the missions on the Cornerstone trading platform, they would also accept other tower missions or hunt monsters in the wilderness. In the vicinity of Heaven Battling City, the human race was the most respected. Although there were also foreign races, they all lived with their tails between their legs. However, there was still oppression and strife between humans. Iron Dragon couldn't stand the harassment from another mercenary group and was forced to accept the mainland mission that the elves had hung on the Cornerstone platform for a long time. It took them half a year to come to the Wildlands. The two of them chatted for about an hour before Tangjin nodded his head in satisfaction. Now that the moonlight pebble is in my hands, don't think about it anymore. You've come all the way here. If you return empty-handed, it'll be a big loss. I can't bear to see you like this. After Tangjin spoke up to this point, he displayed an expression that said, "I'm thinking for you." He then turned to Tai Long and said, "In order to not let you guys suffer too great of a loss, I've decided to hire you guys as the Holy Dragon City Mercenary Association's professional guidance to train those rookie mercenaries. As long as you do your best, I will not mistreat you." Tangjin patted Tai Long's shoulder and happily said, "It's decided then." The corner of Tai Long's mouth twitched and he nodded helplessly. This move of Tangjin's was equivalent to putting them under house arrest here. It was impossible for them to leave. People had no choice but to lower their heads when they were under the roof. If they were to force Tangjin to fall out with them, they would definitely not be able to reap any good fruits. And NBSP, Tai Long was actually already very satisfied with this result. After hesitating for a moment, Tai Long asked Tangjin, "City Lord, may I ask how Xiaowing is doing?" "She's fine. She just met a bunch of people from her clan and is now chatting with them." Tangjin revealed a strange expression as he spoke to Tai Long. When they heard that Xiaowing was fine and had even met someone from his own clan, Tai Long and his clan members all felt their hearts relax. After arranging things for Tai Long and the others, Tangjin also prepared to go back and rest. These 2 days, he had been moving the buildings and he felt a little tired. Seeing that Tangjin was about to leave, Tai Long recalled something and asked, "Lord Wufu, can we get points to exchange for those special equipment?" When Tangjin heard this, he turned around and smiled at Tai Long. "As long as you work hard, in less than a year, each of you will be able to exchange for one. Are you satisfied?" "I'm satisfied, very satisfied." Tai Long was overjoyed and said, "It's good that you're satisfied. Go and rest." After Tangjin finished speaking, he left the cave with a face full of smiles. Standing in the middle of a pile of messy materials, Tangjin was thinking about how to build this shelter. When the disaster of the cold moon arrived, the entire wildlands would fall into a desperate situation. All the wanderers in the wilderness would definitely look for shelter everywhere. As the Holy Dragon City's reputation spread far and wide, there would definitely be more wanderers coming to the Holy Dragon City. Only by relying on the protection of a strong person could one survive in a disaster. Taking this opportunity, Tang Jin could justifiably take in a large number of people. Why not? However, before that, they had to stay in the refuge area prepared by Tang Jin for a period of time. It was impossible for them to become Holy Dragon City residents directly. The area of the shelter that Tang Jin had prepared was very large. After the cold moon disaster was over, he would transform this place into another residential area in the Holy Dragon City. Holy Dragon City's industrial area would also be built here, and the workers would be the recruited wanderers. The huge soul reincarnation altar that was about to be built would also be started in this area. Sitting on the top of the military jeep, Tang Jin calmed his mind and started the map application plugin. Under his control, a row of huge mountains rose from the ground, surrounding nearly 100 square kilometers of land. This area was located behind Holy Dragon City's commercial district, and the passage was located in the back valley. The residents of the Holy Dragon City could enter this area from the back valley and participate in the construction work. After the enclosure work was completed, the next step was the basic construction work. Because it was only a temporary shelter, Tang Jin didn't carry out a large-scale construction. He only collected a large number of construction materials and casually piled them here. After a few decades, the harm of these building materials was minimal. After that, the residents of Holy Dragon City only needed to tidy up a little and they could build countless simple houses. After driving around in a circle, Tang Jin returned to the main city of the Holy Dragon City. After returning to his own city hall, Tang Jin was preparing to arrange people to build the shelter area when an unexpected visitor suddenly arrived. A white-clothed lady floated in and bowed to Tang Jin. This woman's appearance was peerless, but her face was pale. When she walked, her feet didn't touch the ground, and she looked like an immortal. She was the female manager of the Ghost Bank, a real female ghost. Greetings to the city lord. I hope you don't mind my sudden visit. Tang Jin used a strange expression to look at the white-clothed lady. He really did not understand why she had come to look for him. Could it be related to that little Ing from last night? If you have something to say, just say it. Talking to a great beauty was indeed a pleasing thing to the eye. However, if this beauty was not a living person, but a real ghost, then it would not be too good. The white-clothed lady smiled and said to Tang Jin, I've come this time because I have a matter that I need to trouble you with. The little shadow that entered the main city last night is actually a branch of our soul race. However, she is different from us. She has a real body and can move freely in the day. This is an ability that we souls dream of. Even I can only move around during the day for a short period of time. I'll be injured if I move around for too long. The woman in white smiled and said, however, Xiaoying is different. She can move freely under the sun. As long as she is well protected, she will not be affected. For Xiaoying to be able to do this, he was definitely an exception. Furthermore, Xiaoying's ability is extremely important to our spirit bank. After the woman in white said this, a hint of excitement appeared on her face, and her originally pale face seemed to have a hint of red. After Xiaoying joins us, she can become a salesman of our ghost bank and carry out our business in the commercial district. Originally, because we were afraid of the sun, we could only stay in the bank's area, which led to the failure to increase our sales. But as long as Xiaoying joins the bank, our business will definitely improve significantly. The woman in white became more and more excited as she spoke, and in the end, she couldn't help but laugh. After laughing for a while, the white-clothed woman felt that she had lost her composure a little, so she returned to her dignified appearance. Tang Jin's expression became even more strange. He did not expect that this white-clothed woman would actually plan to let Xiaowing start her business in the business district. This matter was a little outrageous, but when he thought about it carefully, it was a wonderful idea. The people who were active in the business district were either merchants or wanderers, and they were the best customers of the Ghost Bank. Whether it was a merchant doing business or a wanderer buying goods, they might encounter a shortage of funds. At this time, the Ghost Bank, which could use souls as collateral and even give out unlimited loans, became their best choice. Moreover, to develop customers in the business district, there was also the sinister intention of the Ghost Bank. The Ghost Bank's trading rules were too strange. It used souls that couldn't be seen or touched. It was inevitable that some people would try to get lucky and use all their souls to exchange for the brain. After that, he would take the brain pearl and leave the world. What could the Ghost Bank do to him? Find new stories on NOV/ELBin.com. However, if there were any fools who did that, they would definitely regret it to the extreme. How could the Ghost Bank, which even Tang Jin felt was not to be trifled with, be such a simple place? After thinking for a moment, Tang Jin rubbed his nose and said to the white-clothed lady, "I'm afraid it's not a good idea to do such a thing in my commercial district." "You're wrong. Even if we don't do it, there will be others." As long as there were businesses and transactions, this kind of thing was inevitable. If we do it, the market will be more regulated and fair. As a token of our appreciation, we can give you a 2% commission. What do you think? This 1% didn't seem like much, but when added up, it was a very objective number. If one said that Tang Jin was not moved, that would definitely be nonsense. If Tang Jin wanted to develop and grow in the world of Lucheng, a huge number of brain beads were indispensable. It was just that he had never been able to figure out the Ghost Bank's arrival. He was more or less wary of the soul race that the white-dressed woman had mentioned. However, the other party claimed to possess information regarding the secret soul cultivation technique. This was the thing that moved Tang Jin the most. After thinking about it, the advantages of the cooperation between the two sides still outweighed the disadvantages. Since that was the case, there was no need to hesitate. "I agree to your request and allow you to do business in the commercial district. However, your customers must be mainly those foreign race merchants, and at the same time, you must clearly state the rules of the transaction, and not be allowed to cheat. If there were residents of Holy Dragon City who wanted to borrow money, there must be a limit. They were not allowed to exceed their ability to repay. Also, can you reveal some information about the secret soul technique?" Tang Jin looked at the white-clothed lady and probed. The woman in white shook her head and looked apologetic. "I'm very sorry, the information you want is too high level, I can't make the decision to give it to you. However, as your level continues to increase and Holy Dragon City continues to grow, I believe that one day, you will be able to easily reach the customer level standard that we have set." Tang Jin was a little disappointed when he heard this. However, this was also within his expectations. After sending the white-clothed lady off, Tang Jin walked to the window and looked into the distance in silence. Tang Jin felt that he was becoming more and more unable to see through this strange Ghost Bank and the mysterious soul race. That afternoon, in the Holy Dragon City's business district, a beautiful young girl in a black cloak appeared. This girl was Xiaowing, and she had now become the new salesperson at the Ghost Bank. She was constantly handing out flyers in the commercial district, and at the same time, she promoted to the surrounding foreign merchants, explaining the loan methods of the Ghost Bank. This kind of soul collateral in exchange for brains had moved many people in the commercial district. After they confirmed it over and over again, they excitedly pressed their thumbprints on the contract made of monster skin and received a large number of brain beads. In just one day, the Spirit Bank had issued a sole loan of 10 million brain beads. According to the 2% commission rate, Tangjin easily obtained 200,000 brain beads. While Tangjin was speechless, he also felt deep sympathy for those foreign merchants who thought they were lucky. One had to be honest when dealing with the Ghost Bank. If one intended to renege on the debt, one would definitely regret it. In the vast wilderness, a few paths leading to Holy Dragon City had already been forcibly trampled out. Especially recently, there were more and more caravans and wanderers going back and forth on these roads. As time passed, they naturally attracted the attention of the pillaging teams. The caravans filled with goods were so fast that the raider groups of all sizes drooled. However, the Holy Dragon City had issued an order that if any group of bandits dared to lay their hands on these caravans, they would definitely be hunted down by the Holy Dragon City. The nearby looters could not afford to provoke the Holy Dragon City, which had risen to power. Powerful equipment and City Lord Liu, who had the cultivation of a lord, were a powerful deterrent to these bandits. Moreover, these passing caravans weren't easy to deal with. Almost every caravan had a level 4 cultivator as a guard. As for the raiders group, most of them were at level 2, and level 3 was already very rare. Those with high cultivation and ability would not waste their lives in an organization like the Raider Gang, which was hated by everyone. They would have long found another way out. However, there were also some guys with high cultivation bases who had committed countless crimes and had been in the business of killing people for goods. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. However, most of these people were lone rangers who came and went without a trace. Very few people knew where they were going. There were also small groups of 3 to 5, all of whom were elites. They would disappear after one job, and the harvest each time was enough to feed them for a long time. This kind of high-level existence would not pay attention to the low-level raider groups. Looking at the fragrant fat meat swaying in front of them, the members of the low-level raider team felt like their hearts were being scratched by hundreds of claws, and they were in great pain. They were all watching, hesitating, struggling, and accumulating their explosive power. The problem was whether they should do it or not. Some time ago, a group of mysterious black-robed men had suddenly appeared and contacted dozens of large and small bandit groups in a short time. These black-robed men were of very high levels, with the lowest cultivation at level 3. Their first move had intimidated the leaders of these bandit groups. According to the black-robed men's request, the leader of the raiding group had to lead his men to the pasture of the Cyclops. At the same time, the black-robed men said that if the members of the raider group didn't go, then they would be killed together. Under the threat of death, the leaders of the raiders had to suppress their anger and suspicion and rushed to their destination with their men. When the raiders arrived at the One-Eyed Giant's pasture, they were surprised to find that the number of people who came was far beyond their imagination. As far as the eye could see, there were at least 1,000 members of the raider group in the entire Stone Pillar area. Some of the leaders of the pillaging groups were secretly puzzled. Since when were there so many wild cultivators around the Holy Dragon City? Not to mention that among these wild cultivators, from time to time, the figures of high-level cultivators could be seen, and they exuded a terrifying aura. Some of the rogue cultivators recognized the identity of some high-level cultivators. They were all lone thieves. I don't get to see them all year round, so why have they all gathered here this time? A bad feeling hit their hearts, causing the leaders of the raider group to whisper to each other. Don't tell me that we've boarded a pirate ship? The leaders of the pillaging group, who were already thieves, actually felt like they were on a pirate's boat. From this, it could be seen how terrible and notorious these lone bandits were. By noon, all the looters had arrived. The number of wild cultivators in the Stone Pillar area had reached nearly 2,000. There would never be so many wild cultivators near Holy Dragon City, so these guys must have come from other areas. A group of black-robed men, who who had covered their bodies completely, walked out, and the wild cultivators made way for them. After coming to the center of the crowd, a black-robed man who exuded an oppressive aura stepped out of the crowd and jumped onto a broken stone pillar. He was wearing a bone mask, and his cold voice slowly floated out from under the mask. "I've gathered all of you here today to give you a chance to make a fortune." The black-robed man glanced at the wild cultivators and continued, "The Holy Dragon City is occupying everyone's territory and threatening everyone. They won't allow you to get rich. They're really going too far." Some of the members nodded in agreement. Ever since the Holy Dragon City was established, their days had indeed been a lot harder. "Who are we? We lick the blood on our blades, we settle grudges, and we kill people whenever we don't agree with each other. This Holy Dragon City thinks that just because they have some strength, they don't treat us brothers as humans. Do you think we, the great men, can endure this?" The masked and black-robed man's voice was extremely loud when he said this, almost as if he was roaring. It was unknown if it was a prearranged uproar, but a group of people immediately began to shout and curse the Holy Dragon City, their faces filled with madness and arrogance. Some of the wild cultivators were infected by the atmosphere and also started shouting. It didn't take long for the stone pillar area to be filled with the roars of people seeking revenge on Holy Dragon City, causing a series of echoes. Some of the more rational wild cultivators didn't want to get involved, but when they noticed the threatening cold eyes of the black-robed men, they could only wave their arms and put on an act. The shouting lasted for a minute before it subsided under the pressure of the masked and black-robed man. "I said I would give everyone a chance to make a fortune because of this." The masked black-robed man took out a small card from his pocket and showed it to the wild cultivators around him. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the card, not understanding what that card had to do with making a fortune. You guys might not know, but this kind of card is called an application card. It's something Holy Dragon City got from who knows where. The caravans traveling to and from the Holy Dragon City have more or less these cards in their hands. As long as you intercept them, these cards will belong to you. When the time comes, you just have to give me those cards, and I'll buy them at the price of 100,000 brain beads per card." Everyone was shocked by his words. To these wild cultivators, 100,000 brain beads was a huge sum. As long as he made a deal and got a few useful cards, he could wash his hands and quit, changing places to live a simple life. For a moment, the eyes of countless wild cultivators began to light up. Their eyeballs kept rolling around as they thought about how to get those application cards. Most of the rogue cultivators in the raid group were blinded by greed. As long as the temptation was big enough, someone would take the risk. Not to mention, not many of these bandits were good people. However, when they thought of the Holy Dragon City's powerful forces and all kinds of legends, these wild cultivators felt a little short of breath. They were afraid that they would lose their lives if they failed to plunder. But Holy Dragon City is very powerful. We can't beat them, can we? A wild cultivator's voice rang out, causing the fanatical members of the raider team to immediately wake up. Thinking of the Holy Dragon City's power, they felt cold sweat on their backs. Looking at the group's dispirited cultivators, the masked black-robed man snorted and continued, "Everyone, don't be intimidated by the Holy Dragon City's propaganda. As far as I know, the Holy Dragon City isn't as powerful as the rumors outside. The information they released was just to scare you. Why didn't they think about it? If Holy Dragon City was really that powerful, why was it still a third-class city? This didn't make sense at all. Moreover, we have a total of 2,000 people at this time, and each of us is a highly skilled hero. Together, we are a powerful force. As long as we work together and attack together, would the Holy Dragon City dare to touch us?" Seeing that the wild cultivator was already tempted, the masked and black-robed man continued to guide him. "Moreover, after we take action, we will quickly hide in the wilderness. No matter how capable the Holy Dragon City is, can they really dig 3 feet deep into this area? As the masked and black-robed man continued to tempt them, more and more wild cultivators began to be tempted. Many of them were so excited by the wealth that their eyes turned red. Now, as long as those caravans appeared in front of them, they would kill them regardless of the consequences and snatch the application card back. After seeing this, the masked and black-robed man sneered, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Holy Dragon City, I'll see what you can do this time." Another morning arrived. A foreign tribe caravan walked out of the city gate and slowly left the Holy Dragon City. Huolu sat on a mount and looked at the Holy Dragon City residents fishing in the salty river. He felt that the scene was beautiful. This time, their caravan stayed for half a month before reluctantly leaving the Holy Dragon City's commercial district. The past half a month had been the most comfortable life Fire Rood had ever had. The Holy Dragon City's business district had all kinds of delicacies, novel goods, and all kinds of brilliant business methods, all of which had left a deep impression on Huolu. He had already made up his mind. After this batch of goods was sold, he would return to Holy Dragon City again and live here with his family for a year and a half. After so many years of running around, it was time for him to recuperate for a while. Thinking up to this point, Huolu couldn't help but feel the application card in his pocket, his heart burning. As a qualified merchant, Fiery Lu had long realized the enormous value of those cards. That was why he had used everything he had, even borrowing a large sum of brain matter from the Holy Dragon City's Ghost Bank, and bought 10 application cards. When he returned to those high-level buildings, the application cards in his hands would definitely bring him an unimaginably high return. People were in high spirits when happy things happened. Fire Lu felt relaxed all over. From time to time, he would take out a flat metal wine pot he had bought from Holy Dragon City and take a sip. The team slowly moved forward along the newly opened road, getting further and further away from Holy Dragon City. When they passed by an area full of withered vines, the guard leader's expression suddenly became tense, and he loudly ordered the caravan to stop. They were all old merchants, and when they saw this scene, they immediately realized that danger was approaching. Even without the guard leader's command, all the members of the merchant group immediately drew their weapons and shields. They quickly gathered their mounts together and formed a defensive circle. The guards of the caravan all unsheathed their weapons and looked around nervously. Fire Lu shuddered and immediately jumped down from his mount. At the same time, he took out an exquisite goblin crossbow from his waist. It was also at this moment that the rapid sound of clothes rubbing against each other was heard from the withered vines. At the same time, a large number of sharp arrows fell from the sky. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. Enemy attack! Raise your shields and defend. The leader of the guards shouted as he raised a shield to block the incoming arrow. A few screams rang out. A few of the caravan members had been shot by arrows, and they were groaning in pain. The bow-wielding cultivators among the guards also quickly drew their bows and returned fire at the enemies in the vines, occasionally hitting their targets. However, compared to the number of enemy archers, the archers in the caravan had no advantage. Judging from the density of the arrows, there were probably more than 100 archers. According to the normal ratio of archers to melee fighters, there were at least 600 or 700 robbers this time. As long as they fired a few more waves of arrows, the casualties of the caravan would definitely increase rapidly. When the caravan's defensive circle was broken, these ambushing enemies only needed one fierce attack to break the caravan into pieces. At that time, the caravan members would be at the mercy of others. "This won't do, quickly think of a way." A merchant shouted, his face filled with anxiety. There were too many enemies this time, and they had no confidence in defeating them. If they continued to fight, they would be surrounded by the bandits sooner or later. The best solution at the moment was to retreat in the direction of Holy Dragon City. At this thought, Wu Lu suddenly slapped his thigh and quickly took out a walkie-talkie from his pocket. During this time, Friar Rude had figured out how to use the walkie-talkie, so he turned it on and shouted with great familiarity. Holy Dragon City Patrol Team, we've been attacked by bandits. We're requesting backup. In order to ensure the safety of these caravans in the Holy Dragon City area, the commercial district gave each caravan a walkie-talkie for free and gave them special training. At that time, many foreign merchants thought that the Holy Dragon City was being superfluous. Some of them even boasted that the guards of the trade caravan could kill the bandits on the spot, and the Holy Dragon City would not have to worry about it. After all, the Holy Dragon City had to pay a certain fee to send troops to rescue them. Those foreign merchants were not willing to spend this money in vain. The merchant beside him had said something similar, but he did not expect to be slapped in the face so quickly. Following Wu Lu's call, a response immediately came from the walkie-talkie, which made Wu Lu feel much more at ease. Please report your caravan number, the location of the attack, and the information of the bandits. A man's voice came from the walkie-talkie, his tone calm and decisive. The merchant team's code is Y109, and they were attacked in area number 4. The number of bandits should be no less than 500. The trained Friar Rude didn't hesitate and reported the information the other party had asked for. The warning has been received. We will arrive at the battlefield in 10 minutes. Please resist. After the voice from the walkie-talkie came out, Friar Lu saw a large group of enemies rushing out of the withered vines and surrounding the caravan. Everyone, hold on. The Holy Dragon City's patrol team will be here soon. We'll be saved then. Friar Rude's words immediately boosted the morale of the fearful caravan members. The Holy Dragon City's powerful military image had already been deeply rooted in the hearts of these foreign tribe caravan members. Since the Holy Dragon City could help them, the possibility of everyone surviving would greatly increase. Everyone, hold on. Once the Holy Dragon City's warriors arrive, these bandits will be in trouble. The leader of the guards of the caravan roared and sent the bandits flying. He laughed as he faced another enemy. Just as the foreign trade caravan was struggling to resist the bandits, in a military jeep in the distance, a fully armed Holy Dragon City soldier spoke to the driver beside him, "Head to area number 4 immediately, we have work to do." The driver immediately stepped on the gas and drove the car out. We've been shopping for half a month, and we're finally opening for business today. I wonder which group of looters is this? The 3 Holy Dragon City soldiers in the back seat laughed and said a few words. At the same time, they quickly checked their weapons to ensure that they would not malfunction during the battle. At the same time, the leader of the patrol team began to contact the other teams and inform them of the attack on the merchant team. After receiving the notice, the 3 patrol teams closest to area number 4 also began to rush toward the battle site. After the captain of the patrol team thought about it, he felt a little uncertain, so he contacted the Holy Dragon City headquarters. Holy Dragon City headquarters, I'm from the patrol team of area number 4. Currently, a caravan is under attack in the area I am in. The merchant group's number Y109 was attacked. When they called the police, they claimed that there were more than 500 bandits. There are too many enemies, and we don't have enough combatants. Requesting air support, over. In less than a minute, there was a reply from the walkie-talkie. The caravan number has been confirmed. The request for air support has been approved. The armed helicopters are starting and will be heading to area number 4 soon. At the same time, on the Holy Dragon City's city walls, a Holy Dragon City cultivator was piloting a military helicopter. He slowly rose into the sky and quickly flew into the distance. The merchants and wanderers who had seen the armed helicopter for the first time had their mouths wide open in shock. They looked at the disappearing armed helicopter with disbelief. The Holy Dragon City residents at the side straightened their backs, their faces full of pride. Inadvertently, the Holy Dragon City had once again displayed its formidable strength. In Area Number 4, a bloody battle was going on. The bandits who had come to rob them were not hundreds as Fire Rude had estimated, but thousands. The bandits surrounded the caravan from all four directions and attacked the caravan's defensive circle without stopping. The sound of swords clashing was like a storm, filling the entire battlefield. Blood splattered everywhere, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. In the battle of swords and sabers, people kept screaming and falling to the ground, and the blood that gushed out quickly soaked the mud and stones. The eyes of the bandits, who had 3 times the number of the caravan members, were bloodshot at that moment. They only wanted to quickly get rid of the caravan and snatch the goods and application cards. In the already collapsed defensive circle, Fire Rude shot out an arrow and killed the bandits who had pounced on him. Then, he quickly looked for cover and quickly loaded his arrows. Huolu's body was covered in blood, and there was a knife wound on his shoulder. Blood had already soaked through his clothes. If he didn't have the cultivation of a rank 3, and if he didn't travel through the wilderness all year round to train a good body, he would probably be lying dead on the ground now. Looking at the members of the trade caravan falling to the ground, Fire Rude's heart was like boiling soup. He kept praying for the Holy Dragon City's reinforcements to arrive soon. Another member of the caravan was cut down by the bandit. Then, the one-eyed bandit raised his saber and charged at Fire Rude with a sinister smile. Looking at the bandit's ugly face, Fire Rude's heart trembled. He was afraid that he would not be able to escape death today. "I don't care anymore, I'll drag one more down with me before I die." Huolu's eyes flashed. He quickly pulled out a demon dagger, ready to fight to the death. The bandit seemed to have seen through Huolu's identity, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. With a loud shout, he swung his blade at Huolu's head. Bang! A crisp gunshot rang out. The bandit who had attacked the Fire Runes trembled, and a pained expression appeared on his face. A hint of red had soaked through his clothes. It was the color of blood. Plop! The thug's body fell forward and landed heavily in the dust. Huolu, who had been prepared to fight to the death, was overjoyed when he saw this. He quickly looked in the direction of the gunshot. The sound of the gunshot seemed to have some kind of magic, causing the intense battlefield to instantly fall silent. Everyone turned their heads and looked in the same direction. In the boundless wilderness, a steel monster was speeding toward the battlefield, leaving a trail of dust behind it. On top of this steel monster, a man holding a sniper rifle was adjusting the muzzle and pulling the trigger again. Bang! After another gunshot, the sniper, who was still hundreds of meters away, accurately shot the head of a knife-wielding criminal. This bloody killing scene immediately awakened everyone on the battlefield. Not good, the Holy Dragon City's patrol team. Hurry up and run, or it'll be too late. Damn it, just a little bit more. They don't have many people, just kill them. That's right. Let's kill these Holy Dragon City bastards. Nearly 100 brave bandits immediately rushed out of the camp and pounced on the car with a hint of madness on their faces. The Holy Dragon City was the giant dragon that hovered above their heads, making them anxious all day long. Now that they had the advantage in numbers, the bandits actually had the courage to slaughter the dragon. Many archers also began to shoot at the car. Sharp arrows streaked across the air and landed on the road in front of the car. It was as if doing so could increase their confidence. But at that moment, the machine gunner on the car suddenly opened fire. The distance that was out of reach for an archer was the best range for a machine gun. Pa pa pa. The rapid firing sounds began to echo in the wilderness. The hundreds of bandits who were rushing toward the cars immediately fell to the ground like wheat bundles swept by a strong wind. The crazy expression froze on his face. Hot blood spurted out of his broken body, and the blood mist fell on the faces of the other criminals. The arrogant battle cries had been completely replaced by painful screams. The criminals who weren't hit by the bullets turned around and fled without any hesitation. They no longer had any fighting spirit. This swan and I, this swan and I. One of the leaders pointed at the bodies on the ground and shouted in fear. However, his words were stuck in his throat and he could not shout them out. Why aren't you King running? Are you waiting for death? The other leader of the raid group shouted and immediately fled. As soon as he said that, the bandits, who were originally full of ferocious killing intent, instantly changed to panic. They hurriedly turned around and fled in the opposite direction. Nearly 1,000 people's movements were shockingly consistent as they all fled in a sorry state, like stray dogs. Every bandit exerted all their strength, afraid that they would be killed by the Holy Dragon City's patrol team if they were one step slower than the others. The shocking change on the battlefield left the remaining caravan members dumbfounded. They looked at the fleeing bandits and finally experienced the Holy Dragon City's deterrent force to these bandits. Even the cultivator battle teams in the high-level buildings didn't have the power to make a 1,000-man raid team flee at the sight of them. Although they acknowledged that Holy Dragon City was powerful, they had no idea how powerful it was. At this moment, they finally understood the meaning of the word powerful. The Holy Dragon City had destroyed 6 towers in a row. It truly lived up to its reputation. Just as the caravan members were sighing in their hearts, the members of the raiding group were full of regret, cursing themselves for being blinded by lard. The masked black-robed man had just bewitched him, and he had foolishly rushed over to rob him. He was simply seeking his own death. The Holy Dragon City's warning and massacre were not that simple. Half a month ago, the largest looters in the area had been killed by them. Their bodies were still hanging on the rocks to dry, a warning to the looters nearby. Half a month later, he had ignored the Holy Dragon City's warning and come to rob these caravans. Damn it, was he seeking death like this? Did he not want to die fast enough? Even though they had planned to end the battle as soon as possible before the battle, and then quickly hide, Holy Dragon City would be helpless. However, who would have thought that the Holy Dragon City would be so fast? They had arrived within 10 minutes of the battle. This time, he was finished. Just as the bandits had this thought, rapid gunshots were heard again. The criminals at the back were hit by machine gun bullets one after another. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, and screams rang out. Dozens of corpses were scattered among the wild grass, their eyes wide open as if they were resenting themselves for rushing so forward and running so slowly. Hearing the screams and seeing their companions falling to the ground, the remaining bandits were terrified and ran even faster. The bandits who had mounted beasts kept stabbing their mounts with the tip of their knives, urging them to run faster through the pain. Forced by their desire to live, they burst out with a terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, they had run 1,000 meters away. The sound of a car braking resounded, and dust filled the air. The jeep had already stopped in front of the caravan. Find PT Tez on n/vln.cm. A few Holy Dragon City soldiers jumped out of the car with automatic rifles in their hands. Their faces were cold and bloodthirsty. Huo Lu finally relaxed. He strode over and then bowed. "Thank you for coming. If you were any later, I'm afraid we would all be dead." Huo Lu's expression was that of someone who had just survived a disaster. The Holy Dragon City soldier nodded to Fire Rude and quickly scanned the casualties of the caravan. He took out his walkie-talkie and began to report. Huo Lu hesitated for a moment, then asked the Holy Dragon City soldiers, "Brother, aren't you going to continue chasing?" If they let these bandits escape, they might attack other caravans again. This was what Huo Lu was most worried about. The profits gained from his trip to Holy Dragon City were extremely high. The Fire Runes did not want to lose this golden trade route for these damn looters. The soldier smiled at Fire Rude. Don't worry, they can't escape. When they broke the Holy Dragon City's prohibition, they were destined to die. After saying this, the soldier was full of killing intent, but he had a proud smile on his face. From the sky, the fleeing bandits were like headless flies, scurrying around the barren land. Even if they could no longer run, the bandits still moved their feet with difficulty, trying to keep their distance from the Holy Dragon City soldiers behind them. The bloody scene that had just happened in front of their eyes frightened these brutal men who licked blood on their blades. No matter how fierce these desperate bandits were, they understood that there was only one life. In the face of such a one-sided slaughter, it would be strange if they didn't run. It was not a lie that the older one was, the smaller one's courage would be. It wasn't that these bandits didn't have the courage, but that they were better at judging the situation and were unwilling to take risks, let alone make unnecessary sacrifices. Didn't you see that the 100 bandits who had charged at the Holy Dragon City's patrol team were all young and inexperienced? As long as it was those old thieves, they wouldn't rush up to die in a moment of impulse. The facts proved that their choice was correct. After the fleeing bandits ran for some distance, someone finally stopped and began to call for his companions. Don't King run. Those guys from Holy Dragon City haven't caught up. Rest for a while, I almost died from running. Who has water? Can I have a sip? As if it was contagious, as soon as they lost their momentum, many of the bandits who could not hold on immediately knelt on the ground and gasped for breath. All kinds of vulgarities spewed out of their mouths, cursing Holy Dragon City in all kinds of ways. However, some of them didn't stop and kept running. These bandits were very familiar with the damn cars in the Holy Dragon City, so they did not dare to stop. They knew very well that if they were targeted by such a car, even the best mount would be exhausted to death. It was really difficult to deal with. The bandits were envious as they looked at the mounts that had gone far away. Compared to the bandits who rode on mounts, these bandits who ran on foot were undoubtedly extremely miserable. Some of them were resting while others were running for their lives. Under such circumstances, the bandits who were resting began to panic. Aren't you tired? Why don't you all take a break? Take a break! Some people shouted unwillingly, but no one paid attention to them and no one stopped. They're not stupid. Let's run, let's see who can outrun who. Looking at their companions who were panting heavily but still kept their heads down, the bandits who were resting wailed and cursed a few times, but they could only get up and continue running. No one was willing to be the last, because that would have the highest chance of death. However, they didn't know that the Grim Reaper had his eyes on them. Even the bandits on their mounts couldn't escape. Boom! A muffled explosion suddenly rang out. The fleeing bandits looked up and saw smoke rising from a place far ahead. There were also faint beast howls and screams. The bandits who were running for their lives stopped at the same time. Hundreds of people looked at each other, a sense of uneasiness surging in their hearts. That's the sound of the Swan and I mount? One of the leaders asked. At the same time, he set up a human ladder and ordered one of his men with good eyesight to climb up and see what was going on. The thin criminal quickly climbed up the human ladder and began to observe carefully. With just a glance, this guy was so scared that his whole body trembled and cold sweat poured down his forehead. When the anxious bandit leader saw this, he was shocked and scolded in exasperation, "What the hell did you see? Hurry up and tell me." The criminal who was checking the situation immediately turned around and said with a sad face, "There's a flying thing in the sky chasing after those riders. Many people have been killed. F***CK. The leader of the pillaging group heard this and cursed gloomily. He turned around and ran in another direction. Originally, they had hoped that the group of mount-riding grandsons would strike the mine for them. They did not expect to encounter the Holy Dragon City's attack helicopters. This time, they were really unlucky. The leader of the raider group had seen those flying metal things once, and he knew how terrifying they were. It was flying at a high speed and firing machine guns continuously. Even if the mount had 10 legs, it would not be able to outrun that damn thing. Now that things had come to this, they could only escape in different directions and see who would survive. Get out of the way, don't gather together, run as far as you can. Similar orders kept coming out of the surviving leaders of the raider groups. Then, the bandits who were on the verge of collapse scattered and fled in all directions. Whether they lived or died, it was up to fate. Just as the bandits scattered like birds and beasts, the mounted beasts that had already fled far away once again returned to their original path. However, this time, they were on the verge of collapse. In the blue sky, a military helicopter was chasing them unhurriedly, shooting bullets continuously, blowing up the criminals on the ground one after another. Roars, blood, and dismembered corpses were everywhere. Of the nearly 300 bandits riding on mounts, only 100 or so were left. As for the remaining bandits, none of them managed to escape. They were all killed by the Holy Dragon City cultivators on the military helicopters. The riders who had planned to flee in all directions now did not dare to run recklessly, because they would die without a doubt. The professionally trained sniper cultivators were simply death gods. They played with sniper rifles to perfection, and each shot took a life. Perhaps the pilot of the assault helicopter intended to capture some of them alive, so he did not use the artillery to fire continuously. Otherwise, these riders would have long become a pile of rotten meat. Find PT Tez on n/vln.cm. The bandits who were running away felt bitter when they saw the riders chasing after them. As they ran, they cursed at the bandits who were riding on their mounts. They had dug out all their ancestors. Of all the places you could have run to, why did you have to run in my direction? These bandits who ran away on their own legs even wanted to die now. Some of the criminals collapsed after seeing the destructive power of the assault helicopters. They lay on the ground, closed their eyes, and waited for death. There were also some quick-witted ones who immediately dropped their weapons and knelt on the ground, making a gesture of surrender. And NBSP, they didn't expect their actions to be so effective. The snipers on the assault helicopters glanced at them and didn't continue to fire. The weight in their hearts was lifted, and the surrendered bandits almost cried tears of joy. If we knew that we would not die if we surrendered, why would we run? It was said that the Holy Dragon City would not easily slaughter prisoners, but would instead lock them up to do menial labor, doing some dirty and tiring work. But even so, it was still better than losing his life. Brother, you died in vain. If only you had surrendered. A bandit who knelt on the ground and surrendered looked at the broken body on the ground in a daze and couldn't help but mutter to himself. This fellow had not knelt down and surrendered just now, and his head had been shot by the Holy Dragon City cultivators. Now, blood was still spurting out of his bare neck. As for his head, it had long flown to God knows where. With the appearance of the Holy Dragon City's assault helicopters, more and more bandits began to kneel and surrender. Looking down from the military helicopter, they could see the ashen-faced bandits with their heads in their hands everywhere. Even though there was only one plane, it completely obliterated the courage of these bandits to escape. Even if the Holy Dragon City cultivators on the plane could not take care of them all, none of the bandits dared to get up and escape. Who knew if the Holy Dragon City still had other pursuers? If they were ambushed again, they would be waiting to be shot. It was pretty good now. He did not have to run for his life, nor did he have to worry about being shot by a sniper. He only had to kneel on the ground and wait for the Holy Dragon City to come and escort him. However, some of the criminals didn't give up. When they saw the assault helicopter leave after the beast, they quickly stood up and continued to run into the wilderness. When they passed by the bandits who knelt and surrendered, they even looked at them with contempt. The bandits who knelt down and surrendered sneered, but in their hearts, they prayed that the Holy Dragon City's soldiers would quickly appear and kill these guys to prove their choice. Very quickly, the bandits' prayers were answered. A series of rapid gunshots rang out, and the criminals who were running for their lives were shot one after another, falling to the ground with faces full of unwillingness. The long line of vehicles stopped, and countless fully armed Holy Dragon City soldiers quickly jumped out of the vehicles. There were nearly 3,000 people. They were orderly, mighty, and murderous. They spread out in a straight line in the wilderness, quickly tying up the surrendered bandits and taking them away. At the same time, they were carefully searching for any survivors. If anyone dared to resist, they would be killed on the spot. With the arrival of the 3,000 Holy Dragon City soldiers, the bandits had no chance of escaping. In the continuous gunfire, the remaining bandits who tried to resist finally collapsed completely. They knelt in the blood and corpses, loudly begging for surrender. The 1,000-man raid group that robbed the caravan was completely annihilated. After hesitating for a long time, I decided to shamelessly ask for a subscription. Friends who have read this book, please go to Cheatyin to support it and give Old White, this little failure, some motivation. Otherwise, I, your brother, will really be a failure. It's not easy to stay up late to write. Your support is the greatest encouragement to the author. Lao Bai would like to thank you. The cruelty of the battlefield was something that those who had never seen it could never imagine. The bandits kneeling on the ground were being held together by the Holy Dragon City soldiers. Their faces were ashen, and their eyes were listless as they looked forward. The broken bodies of the bandits were collected and thrown into a large pit to be buried. The Holy Dragon City did not leave its corpse in the wilderness. It was unhygienic and would easily attract bloodthirsty monsters. For those bandits who were not completely dead but were destined to be unable to be saved, the soldiers of the Holy Dragon City's Second Army with Old Wei Nation rifles would use the standard bayonet to send them on their way. These old antiques that Tang Jin got from the Wei Nation's underground armory were still well preserved even after decades. Even if they were trash, they might still have some value, let alone guns and weapons. The standard weapon of the Second Legion was this old rifle. Although the shooting speed of this old rifle was not as fast as an automatic rifle, it was still very effective in actual combat against criminals. After an inventory check, it was confirmed that they had captured more than 400 bandits and killed more than 700. There were no casualties in the Holy Dragon City's army. From now on, these bandits would spend the rest of their lives in the Holy Dragon City's farm and were not allowed to take a single step into the valley. It was time to harvest the food that Tang Jin had brought. These bandits had come at the right time. Although they had lost their freedom and had to work every day, they no longer had to worry about starving to death. After shoving the bandits into the loaded vehicles and filling them to the brim, the Holy Dragon City soldiers escorted them directly to the Holy Dragon City. Beside a military vehicle, Tai Sing had a cigarette in his mouth as he coldly looked at the 5 leaders of the raider group. Towards these bandit leaders, Tai Sing didn't have the slightest bit of pity. These guys had their hands cuffed and were kneeling on the ground in a row. They were covered in blood and dust. Under the gazes of the surrounding Holy Dragon City soldiers, the bandit leaders shivered. Cold sweat kept dripping from their foreheads, forming deep ravines on their faces. "Speak, who gave you the courage to rob these caravans?" Tai Sing's voice was cold and emotionless. When he looked at the bandit leader, it was like he was looking at a pile of corpses. One of the bandit leaders couldn't bear the atmosphere and said, "First, it's a group of black-robed men. They came out and united us. Then, they asked us to rob the caravans and take the application cards," he explained. "Snatch the application card?" Tai Seng's eyes narrowed as he stared at the bandit leader and asked, "Your main goal is to use the card?" "That's right, those black-robed men are offering a very high price, 100,000 brain beads for an application card." Tai Seng snorted coldly, his face showing disdain. 100,000 brains for one piece. This black-robed man sure has a good plan, but aren't you afraid that you won't be able to spend the money you earn? The bandit leader pulled a long face and said in an unwilling tone, "We didn't want to, but the black-robed men's cultivation was very high. We were no match for them." There was a group of people who did not want to participate in the operation, but they were killed on the spot by the black-robed men. Their bodies were still hanging on the stone pillars in the Cyclops pasture. "We were forced to do so. In addition, we really didn't have any income recently, and our brothers were starving to death. That's why we decided to target the caravan." At this point, the leader of the pillaging group called out to Tai Seng, "Leader Tyson, please let me live. I beg you." The leader of the bandits was in tears, which annoyed Tai Seng. The other 4 bandit leaders had complicated expressions, with disdain and hesitation in their eyes. New N0VEL chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/co/M. In fact, they were also considering whether they should beg for mercy from Tai Seng. "All right, take this guy away and send him to the farm to work." After saying this, Tai Seng stood up, not even looking at the other 4 bandit leaders. "As for the other 4, I'll just kill them." As soon as Tai Seng said this, the bandit leader who was begging for mercy was overjoyed and kept kowtowing in gratitude. The other 4 people's faces were ashen as they started to struggle madly and begged for mercy from Tai Seng. When they saw that someone could live, but they had to die, these guys immediately felt that it was unfair. There was no problem in dying together. They could be companions on the road to hell. But suddenly, someone could avoid death. This immediately broke their psychological defense. The fear of death made them forget their previous hesitation. They writhed their bodies with all their might, praying for the last chance to live. However, no one paid any attention to their pleas for mercy. The cold muzzles of the guns were already pointed at the back of their heads. A leader of the pillaging group with a sallow face saw that his struggle was in vain and his heart suddenly turned to ashes. Just as he was about to give up his futile struggle, an idea suddenly flashed in his mind. "Chief Tai Seng, I have something important to report. Please don't kill me." And NBSP, hearing this, Tyson, who was already in the car, waved his hand at the soldiers, and the criminal leader was immediately brought to the front of the car. "Speak, what information do you have? If it's useless nonsense, I'll make you wish you were dead." Sensing the coldness in Tai Seng's tone, the bandit leader didn't dare to hesitate anymore and quickly reported. "Although those black-robed men were completely covered, I happened to hear their conversation." One of the black-robed men's voice was very familiar. "I remember the last time I heard this sound, it was near Bloodsand City." Before this operation, many lone bandits had been present, but none of them had appeared when they robbed the caravan. "I suspect that they have other plans. According to the style of these guys, I suspect that they will directly rob the commercial district." After the bandit leader said this, he looked at Tyson, hoping that the information he had just reported could save his life. The bandit leader, who was not very good with words and not very smart, actually blurted out a bunch of analysis conclusions that he could not express before under the threat of death. As expected, only under the threat of death would one be able to unleash their true potential. Tai Seng muttered to himself for a moment before letting this bandit leader go and allowing him to join the Holy Dragon City's farm's labor force. The yellow-faced bandit was overjoyed and bowed in thanks. The other 3 bandit leaders were dragged to the side by the Holy Dragon City soldiers and shot dead on the spot. They were thrown into the pit like dead dogs. Sitting in the car, Tyson took out his walkie-talkie and reported to Qianlong about the criminal leader's report. After a moment of silence, Qianlong said slowly, "The black-robed men's goal is likely to be the application cards in the commercial district. It looks like we have to make early preparations." When Tyson heard this, he turned to Qianlong and said, "Does the city lord know about this?" "I know, but he only has one request. That is, when he takes action, try not to destroy the environment of the commercial district." "That's a bit difficult. If they really start a fight in the commercial district, they will definitely cause damage to the commercial district during the battle." Tai Sing smacked his lips and was in a difficult position. "Actually, there's no need to wait for them. That would be too passive. We can take the initiative to attack." Tai Sing's interest was piqued and asked, "Tell me, how did you take the initiative to attack?" Qianlong gave a mysterious smile and spoke to Tessun through the walkie-talkie. "I'm afraid we'll have to seek the city lord's help for this matter." When Tai Sing heard this, he suddenly recalled Tang Jin's mystical ability. Since the Castellan could easily know any movement within 100 kilometers, it shouldn't be a problem to find a group of living people, right? Tang Jin looked at the food crops that were about to be harvested as a faint smile appeared on his face. With these crops, the Holy Dragon City would not have to worry about food. Murong Ziyan sat in the front passenger seat of the car. She naughtily grabbed Tang Jin's big hand. After trimming her nails, she tightly clenched it and didn't let go. After a while, Murong Ziyan's small hand was placed on Tang Jin's thigh, and she began to rub it. "All right, stop fooling around." Seeing that Murong Ziyan's little hand was not being honest, Tang Jin took a deep breath and quickly stopped her. He didn't want to have a car sex show in front of the residents in the fields in broad daylight. Such a happy thing should wait until tonight. Murong Ziyan pouted her little mouth, but her eyes were filled with deep love. She looked like a willful little girl. Only in front of Tang Jin would Murong Ziyan reveal such a little girl's expression. In the eyes of the other residents of the Holy Dragon City, Murong Ziyan, who controlled all the resources of the Holy Dragon City, was an extremely shrewd and decisive woman. Her dignity could not be offended, and she did things in an orderly manner. Many young men in Holy Dragon City had secretly regarded her as a crush. Just as the two of them were chatting, Qianlong's walkie-talkie connected to Tang Jin's all-round digital battle interface, and a slightly low voice entered Tang Jin's ears. Ever since this guy had advanced to the 4th rank, he had been hanging out with Mo Ren all day long, tinkering with some special training program for cultivators. He was nowhere to be seen. "Lord City Master, the bandits who robbed the caravan have been completely defeated, and the captives have been sent to Holy Dragon City. However, when we interrogated the bandits, we discovered that the black-robed man seemed to have some connection with Bloodzan City. And these guys seem to be brewing a big plan, as if they're going to rob Holy Dragon City's commercial district." A trace of coldness appeared on Tang Jin's face when he heard this. After remembering the name Bloodzan City, he slowly said, "The business district has just opened for business. It's best not to damage the environment there." Qianlong was silent for a while before continuing, "We plan to take the initiative to attack, but we can't find out where these guys are hiding in a short time, so we want to ask you for help." Tang Jin smiled as he spoke to Qianlong, "Be prepared. I'll inform you as soon as I have news." Qianlong nodded in agreement and cut off the communication. At the same time, Tang Jin also switched to the map view and began to search all the areas within 100 kilometers. U updates tnvel/buy.com. Since those guys were coveting the Holy Dragon City's application card and were preparing to make a move on the commercial district, their hiding place would not be too far from the Holy Dragon City. As the map view was expanded, all the scenery within 100 kilometers was displayed in front of Tang Jin's eyes. With his control, any object could be displayed in fine detail in front of his eyes. This was a job that required patience. Therefore, Tang Jin simply came to the treehouse and calmed down to carefully observe. Time slowly flowed by. Just when Tang Jin was feeling a little bored, a human figure suddenly flashed and appeared in a certain valley at the corner of the map. Tang Jin's spirit shook. He immediately enlarged the area and began to carefully observe it. This valley was very unremarkable. If it wasn't for the appearance of a figure, it was very likely that Tang Jin would not have noticed this place. In the map view, two cultivators in black robes were walking around the valley, seemingly collecting some kind of plant. Among cultivators, there was a type of secret alchemist that could produce secret medicines with various effects. Most of the secret apothecaries had been changed to holy masters because the production of secret medicine required the assistance of very strong mental power. Judging from the actions of the two black-robed cultivators, they were probably going to concoct some kind of secret medicine. Tang Jin had a rough understanding of the special medicinal ingredients in the wilderness in case he needed them. Therefore, when he saw the herbs collected by the black-robed cultivator, he was sure that they were poisonous plants. They could be made into poisonous powder that could produce strong poisonous smoke after burning. Although this kind of poisonous smoke wouldn't cause immediate death, it could stimulate one's eyes. In serious cases, one's eyes would be blinded. If this kind of poison smoke bomb was thrown into the crowd of Holy Dragon City people, it would be very lively. A cold glint flickered in Tang Jin's eyes when he thought of the possible consequences that the poisonous smoke might cause. He was pondering whether he should personally kill his way over and let them have a taste of the poisonous smoke. However, Tang Jin immediately rejected this idea. This was because he only needed to provide assistance in this matter. In the future, Tai Sang and the others would be in charge of Holy Dragon City's management and defense. Letting them participate in actual combat would also help them gain some experience. Tang Jin observed for a long while. It was only when the two cultivators entered a hidden cave that he sent a set of coordinates to Qianlong. In the following time, he only needed to watch the show. Bloodzan City, if this matter is really related to you, then don't blame me for being impolite. So what if it's a 5th grade city? If you piss me off, I'll still destroy you. In a cave somewhere in the Holy Dragon City, there were many training equipment. Many cultivators were cultivating in the cave branches. In a certain spacious cave, Qianlong looked at the map on the table and pointed at a certain area. Raising his head, he looked at Tessin who was beside him and said, "This is the target location that the city lord has given us. It's about 90 kilometers away from Holy Dragon City." Tai Sang looked around the map and rubbed his chin. There's no cover around this valley. If a large group of carriages approach, they'll be discovered from a long distance. So for this operation, it's best to mobilize our elites to launch a surprise attack and catch them off guard. Qianlong nodded and added, "For safety's sake, I suggest we mobilize the 1st Legion to ambush them on their retreat path. At the same time, the assault helicopters should also participate in the battle and land 10 kilometers away from the target location." The cultivation of these black-robed men and the lone robber were very high. If they were not crippled in the first place, these guys would very likely break out of the encirclement. At that time, it would not be so easy to catch them again. Therefore, once we make our move, we can't hesitate at all. We must do our best to attack. After the two finished their discussion, they began to give orders to the fully armed officers around them. In this battle, the Holy Dragon City's cultivator troop would dispatch 50 elite cultivators to attack the black-robed cultivator in the cave. The Holy Dragon City's 1st Legion would dispatch 500 people to intercept the black-robed cultivators group who might break out of the encirclement. The assault helicopters would also follow the operation and provide air support at any time. After the order was given, everyone immediately began to move. 50 elite cultivators were quickly selected. Most of them were at the peak of level 3, and a few were level 4. For the sake of their mission, these cultivators all wore black hydro leather armor, which was mainly made of Lord-grade hydro leather. This kind of leather armor was very strong and light at the same time. It was very suitable for this kind of surprise attack. The cultivators wearing black leather armors and masks were all silent. They gathered around a long table and began to organize their equipment before the battle. The batch of Japanese swords that Tangjin had obtained from the Celestial Deity Army had all been sent to the headquarters of the Cultivator Battle Squad. Currently, many cultivators in the Holy Dragon City were equipped with these Japanese swords that were as hard as demon weapons. In addition to these sabers, the cultivators were also equipped with sniper rifles, silenced pistols, military throat microphones, grenades, and so on. Almost every Holy Dragon City cultivator had a bunch of random things on them. In addition, in the pockets of these cultivators, almost all of them had 2 or 3 application cards. These application cards were life-saving items that cultivators used points and paper money to buy. Compared to the auction price outside, they were almost 10 times cheaper. The reason why Tangjin didn't distribute these application cards as welfare was that he needed to use his brain pearl to purchase them. He had to recover his cost first. Moreover, the Holy Dragon City's cultivators all had wages and benefits. It was not a difficult thing to buy a few application cards that were sold at internal prices. When the other cultivators of the building city had first joined the Holy Dragon City Cultivator Squad, they had been dazzled by the weapons and equipment distributed by the Holy Dragon City. Everyone felt that it was unreal. This was because the value of all these pieces of equipment together was simply beyond imagination. The weapons and equipment distributed by the Holy Dragon City had almost armed the cultivators to the teeth. After adapting for a while, the newly joined cultivators became used to it. A high investment meant a high output. With these weapons and equipment, the combat power of the cultivators would be multiplied, and their morale would be higher. When the 50 cultivators were done packing, they immediately boarded the Holy Dragon City's transport troop and sped towards their target. At the same time, the Holy Dragon City's First Legion and attack helicopters also launched their operation. The sky was getting dark, and a great hunting show slowly began. As the sun set and the moon rose, the wilderness gradually fell into a deathly silence. Compared to the other areas where monsters ran rampant, the area controlled by the Holy Dragon City was too quiet. Only the occasional howl of a monster could confirm that this was not a dead land. In an unremarkable valley, a black-robed cultivator stood in the shadows and looked around vigilantly. With his level 4 cultivation, the black-robed cultivator could easily detect any signs of danger in this quiet area. However, the black-robed cultivator was still a little indignant about being a sentry. According to his status and cultivation, he would not even bother to do such a thing. It was really too degrading. However, this operation was of great importance. Among the members of the operation, his cultivation wasn't too high, so it was reasonable for him to be assigned to stand guard. Although the black-robed cultivator was a little reluctant, he could only run out obediently and enjoy the cold wind in a corner. Under normal circumstances, no one would have noticed such a secluded valley. In fact, in the past few days, other than the occasional low-level monsters passing by, there was almost no sign of a ghost. Under such circumstances, the black-robed cultivator had unconsciously let down his guard. At this moment, the night wind gently caressed the wild grass, making a rustling sound. The black-robed cultivator was used to this sound and didn't care at all. However, in a corner that he didn't notice, a faint shadow suddenly appeared and quietly approached him. The shadow's stealth technique was extremely high. Every time it moved forward, it would use the sound of the wind to cover up the strange sounds it made, making it impossible for the black-robed cultivator to notice anything strange. The shadow was like a ghost walking in the dark, fully utilizing some things in the night to completely conceal its existence. Before he knew it, the shadow had already approached the black-robed cultivator. A pitch-black dagger appeared in his hand. It was a demon weapon. Another gust of night wind blew, and the shadow shot out like lightning the moment the wind blew. The demonic dagger was aimed at the back of the black-robed cultivator. Pfft! The sharp demonic dagger pierced through the black-robed cultivator's back. The moment he groaned in pain, the shadow reached out and covered his mouth. The demonic dagger drew an arc in the night sky and slashed the black-robed cultivator's neck again, bringing up a thin mist of blood. The black-robed cultivator's eyes bulged and his throat made a gurgling sound. However, because his windpipe was cut off, he couldn't make a sound. After struggling for a while, the black-robed cultivator fell limply to the ground and died silently. After doing all this, the shadow pressed the microphone and sent out a signal. Then, it turned its eyes to a secret cave in the valley. The clouds that blocked the moon moved aside, and a ray of moonlight shone on the shadow. His face was calm and dull, and his hair was white. He was the Holy Dragon City's head instructor, Mr. M.O. Ran. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, the cultivator battle team had specially invited M.O. Ran to take action. In addition to his rich teaching experience, M.O. Ran was actually an excellent assassin. He had just hidden this ability. The last time the Holy Dragon City was being spied on at night, when the cultivators were helpless, Mr. M.O. Ran took the initiative to stand up. His attack had shocked everyone. No one had expected that the upright Mr. Moran was such a terrifying nightwalker. It was for this reason that Mo Yun and Qian Long had specially trained a group of cultivators to be in charge of the Holy Dragon City's inner-city defense. The last time Xiaowing had infiltrated the Holy Dragon City's main city, the people who had silently surrounded her were cultivators who had received Mo Ran's special training. Just as Mo Ran sent out the signal, dozens of black-clothed men jumped out of the wild grass and quickly moved toward the valley. Not long after, the Holy Dragon City cultivators in black armor entered the valley and approached the cave entrance without a sound. As the orders were passed down, the cultivators immediately spread out and blocked the entrance with their weapons. A few cultivators took out something from their pockets and carefully placed it near the entrance of the cave. These were the broadsword landmines that Tang Jin had obtained. They were extremely lethal and had been brought along by Qian Long. "Move out!" Following Qian Long's order, a dozen specially made poison gas grenades were thrown into the cave, immediately drawing a burst of exclamations from the cave. The 1,000 dragons didn't use explosives to blow up the entrance of the cave. First, a small-scale collapse wouldn't be able to stop these cultivators, and the Holy Dragon City cultivators lying in ambush outside might be injured by the rubble. The second reason was that they were afraid that these cultivators would hide in the cave and not come out. If they attacked, it would definitely cause unnecessary casualties. This kind of suffocating poison gas bomb that had been modified by the Holy Dragon City cultivators could force all the cultivators inside out. Even if there were cultivators who did not want to risk coming out, they would die from suffocation from inhaling the poisonous smoke. At the same time as the poison gas bomb was thrown in, a few strong lights were cast at the entrance of the cave, making it as bright as day. Looking out from the hole, he could only see a blinding light. He could not see anything else clearly. A fierce roar came from the entrance of the cave, and several black shadows shot out like lightning, trying to escape from this place. The sound of gunfire rang out like popping beans. The cultivators' bodies immediately burst out with blood and they fell to the ground. As a few cultivators fell to the ground, more and more cultivators rushed out of the cave. They waved their swords and sabers, their faces filled with madness. The 2 machine guns continued to fire, suppressing the cultivators at the entrance of the cave. They only managed to run a few steps before they were piled up on the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Countless pieces of broken rock shot out from the hole, carrying a large amount of debris in all directions. If an ordinary person were to be hit by these stones, they would definitely be shot through. A powerful blow from an advanced cultivator couldn't be ignored. The two Holy Dragon City cultivators operating the machine guns were unfortunately hit in the chest. They spat out blood and fell to the ground. If they weren't wearing the Lord Tier Hydra leather armor, the attack would have killed them both. Just as the sound of the machine gun stopped, nearly 20 black shadows burst out of the cave and rushed in all directions. At this moment, the claymore exploded, and the violent air current carried countless steel balls and collided with the cultivators' bodies. A series of screams rang out at the same time as 7 or 8 cultivators were killed by the dense steel balls. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. The remaining cultivators were attacked by bullets and hidden weapons at the same time. They were all seriously injured, but they were still struggling. The Holy Dragon City cultivators, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately surrounded them. With flying blades, they cut down the enemies one by one. Just as most of the enemies in this wave were killed and only 4 or 5 people were still resisting, another wave of enemies rushed out of the cave. Compared to the first few waves of enemies, these black-robed cultivators who rushed out last were obviously much stronger. They only paid the price of 5 casualties to rush out of the blockade at the entrance of the cave. However, the dense barrage of bullets from the Holy Dragon City cultivators still caused them to suffer varying degrees of damage. Their black robes were instantly soaked in blood. After rushing out, these injured black-robed cultivators didn't linger in the battle and immediately fled under the cover of the night. Thousand Dragon shot down a black-robed cultivator and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. At the same time, he contacted the military helicopter 10 kilometers away. When he was intercepting the black-robed cultivators, one of the level 5 cultivators took advantage of the chaos and attacked Qianlong, almost killing him. Seeing the black-robed cultivator disappear into the night, Thousand Dragons gritted his teeth and snorted. "You want to escape from me? Dream on!" The nameless valley was silent at this moment. The originally plain night wind was now mixed with the smell of blood, giving it a hint of killing intent. After the black-robed cultivators fled, Qianlong immediately left 10 people behind to clean up the battlefield. He then took out an application card and tore it open. The card turned into a stream of light and disappeared, but dozens of mountain motorcycles appeared out of thin air, filling the empty space in front of him. "Get in the car and give chase. We can't let these bastards go today." Qianlong snorted coldly. After swallowing an IV pill, he grabbed a motorcycle and sped off like a bolt of lightning. Although high-level cultivators moved very fast, running at high speed for a long time consumed a lot of physical strength. If he wanted to chase after the black-robed cultivators, it would be more appropriate to ride the motorcycle. After seeing Qianlong leave, the cultivators all grabbed their mountain motorcycles and started up at the same time. Dozens of motorcycles roared loudly and formed a long line, speeding out of the valley. In the dark night, the mountain motorcycles created a bright light, clearly illuminating the road 100 meters away. Countless wheels rolled through the grass, carrying an indomitable momentum, and firmly caught up with the cultivators in black robes who were running away at high speed. At this moment, the Holy Dragon City cultivator on the motorcycle was filled with a murderous aura, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Those who dared to provoke the Holy Dragon City had to be prepared to lose their lives. This was the common belief of all the Holy Dragon City cultivators. "Damn it, what the hell is this?" A black-robed cultivator who was running for his life was alarmed by the roar behind him. He turned his head and saw a large area of strong light. The thing that had made the loud noise was hidden in the bright light and was slowly approaching them. The endless stream of strange things in the Holy Dragon City had already pushed the black-robed cultivators to the brink of collapse. They gritted their teeth, wishing they could tear the Holy Dragon City cultivators into pieces. However, they were also afraid of the weapons in their hands, afraid that they would lose their lives if they were not careful. The only thing he could do now was to run. However, who could understand the depression in their hearts? It was supposed to be a simple operation, and the target was only a small level 3 city, so the black-robed cultivators didn't think much of it. Even though there was information that proved that Holy Dragon City had a large number of flintlocks and their combat power could not be underestimated, no one was too concerned. To ordinary cultivators, the flintlock was absolutely lethal, but to advanced cultivators, they could dodge it as long as they were careful. Moreover, there was no need to directly confront the Holy Dragon City this time. They only needed to plan in secret and then launch a surprise attack. Before the operation, they had already formulated a strict plan to ensure that nothing would go wrong. After the black-robed cultivators arrived at the Holy Dragon City area, they immediately started their operation. At first, the progress was very smooth. Under the coercion and temptation, the greedy bandit groups easily united. According to the original plan, as long as the looters successfully robbed the caravans and took the application cards, they could be abandoned. But who would have thought that this bunch of trash would be so useless, completely annihilated by the Sacred Dragon Legion? However, the black-robed cultivator who was observing in the dark had to admit that the main reason for the failure of this operation was that the Holy Dragon City's weapons were too powerful. The scene of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers killing in all directions made even the black-robed cultivator who was observing in secret shudder in fear. The assault helicopter that arrived later was even more invincible. The black-robed cultivator had no way of dealing with it. With a slight fear, the black-robed cultivator who was in charge of observing the battle retreated back to the cave and told them his findings and thoughts. The feedback from the real battlefield made the black-robed cultivators fall into deep thought. The combat power displayed by the Holy Dragon City had far exceeded their expectations. The black-robed cultivators discussed for a while and decided to change the original plan of attacking the commercial district to a night attack. At the same time, they had also prepared a large amount of poisonous smoke to create chaos and cover their retreat. Once everything was ready, the black-robed cultivator and the many bandits would pretend to be a caravan and sneak into the Holy Dragon City's commercial district without a sound. When the auction house opened at night, they would take action and then leave. The plan was perfect, and dozens of high-level cultivators were involved. It would definitely succeed. However, who would have thought that before the plan could be carried out, the lair that they thought was hidden was discovered and blocked, completely cutting off everyone's way out. If it weren't for the few waves of lone bandits who risked their lives to explore the way, the black-robed cultivators would have no chance of escaping. The black-robed cultivator broke out in a cold sweat at the thought of those messy yet lethal weapons. At this moment, the Holy Dragon City was no longer a small city that they did not fear. Instead, it was a monster that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. If he was not careful, he would be devoured by it. The black-robed cultivators rejoiced in their hearts after escaping the ambush at the entrance, thinking that they could finally escape. However, who would have thought that this group of Holy Dragon City cultivators would linger around and actually pursue them again? When they thought of the terrifying weapons in Holy Dragon City, the black-robed cultivators' hearts, which had already relaxed, were once again in their throats. We can't let them catch up. We have to stop them, he thought. 7 sit envelb/n. C/m for L test vels. The leader of the black-robed cultivators gave the order without hesitation. The 2 black-robed cultivators with the most severe injuries stayed behind to block the enemy and delay as much time as possible. The 2 black-robed cultivators who had been selected slowly stopped, their faces filled with grief and indignation. They were very clear that staying here would only lead to death. However, they had no choice but to obey the orders of the black-robed leader. So what if he dies? At least when leader returns, his family can be taken care of. This kind of death still has some value. At the thought of this, the two black-robed cultivators made up their minds and unsheathed their hidden weapons and swords in unison. They stood proudly in the face of the speeding motorcycle fleet. Even if he died in battle, he would drag a few more Holy Dragon City cultivators down with him. However, just as the thought rose in their minds, a series of rapid submachine gun and pistol shots were heard. The Holy Dragon City cultivator, who was controlling the motorcycle with one hand and holding a gun in the other, had already poured all his bullets onto the two black-robed cultivators. As he was hit by countless bullets, the black-robed cultivator's clothes rippled like water, and blood stained the ground around them. 10,000 arrows piercing the heart, 10,000 bullets piercing the body, the effects were shockingly similar. The two black-robed cultivators trembled. Although they were not dead, there was no possibility of survival. Swish! Qianlong kept his gun and pulled out his sword. Borrowing the momentum of the motorcycle, he swung it horizontally. The blade passed and the neck was broken, but the corpse still did not fall. All right! The Holy Dragon City cultivators who followed closely behind gasped in admiration. They also dragged their sabers and slashed at the two black-robed cultivators. Each slash would bring out a mist of blood, but no corpse fell. It was only when the last Holy Dragon City cultivator's blade swept past and he had already run far away that the two black-robed cultivators' bodies trembled slightly. A gust of night wind blew over, and the originally intact black-robed cultivator instantly crumbled into countless pieces, scattering on the ground. Every cut on the body was extremely precise and smooth. It cut the body but ensured that the body would not be scattered. This required an extremely high level of control over strength, as well as a relatively sharp divine weapon to be able to achieve this perfectly. The Holy Dragon City cultivators who participated in the operation tonight all met these two requirements. The black-robed cultivator leader's blocking methods were completely useless, and Qianlong and the others were getting closer and closer. You four, stop them! The leader of the black-robed cultivators roared. His face under the mask was filled with madness and fear. The four black-robed cultivators looked at each other and immediately stopped in their tracks. With endless madness on their faces, they turned around and pounced on the Holy Dragon City cultivators. They were like moths walking through fire, trying to put out the fire, but the final result was that they would be burned to ashes. The leader of the black-robed cultivators knew this as well, but he had no choice. Even if he had to sacrifice all his subordinates today, he had to stop the Holy Dragon City's pursuers. As long as he could return safely, all the sacrifices were nothing. After thinking up to this point, a black ball appeared in the hands of the leader of the black-robed cultivators. He threw it into the sky with all his might. When the ball was about 50 meters in the air, it suddenly exploded. A strange dark fire the size of a millstone appeared and danced in the sky. This is the signal for support. It won't take long for our Lu Qing soldiers to arrive. Everyone, run! The black-robed cultivator leader glared coldly at Qianlong before turning around and continuing to flee. As for the four black-robed cultivators he had ordered to stop, he didn't even look at them. The battle seemed to have just begun. As the four black-robed cultivators risked their lives to block the path, Qianlong and the others slowed down once more. The rest of the black-robed cultivators wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. They used all their strength and quickly disappeared into the night. As long as they put some distance between them and the Lu Chang soldiers, they would be able to escape safely. The four black-robed cultivators who had tried their best to stop him had successfully delayed him for a while. By the time Qianlong and the others had killed the four black-robed cultivators, the remaining black-robed cultivators were long gone. Qianlong coldly glanced at the corpse on the ground and waved his hand, ordering the others to pursue. At this time, 100 miles away from the Holy Dragon City, a group of Lu Qing warriors riding on mounts were rushing forward. These people were dressed in crimson armor and held an extremely long crimson saber in their hands. Their bodies were filled with killing intent. The leader was a man in red armor. His face was filled with anxiety as he kept urging the mount under him. The underworld fireball that had suddenly appeared in the night sky earlier was the signal for help that he had agreed with the chief elder in advance. It would not be released unless it was absolutely necessary. But it was also because of this that it meant that First Elder and the others were in great danger. The Holy Dragon City is so powerful that it forced the Great Elder to release the Dark Fireball? The red-armored leader was very confused. It was just a small third-class city, but it could actually force the Great Elder of Bloodsand City to such an extent. This matter was really unimaginable. After the news of the application card being auctioned in the Holy Dragon City spread, it immediately attracted the attention of the dignitaries in Luqing. They wanted to get that kind of application card, but they didn't want to give up their brains, which was why they had the plan to attack the caravans and the commercial district. The plan to rob Holy Dragon City was originally a small matter, and did not need to trouble high-level figures like the Great Elder to take action. It was just that the Great Elder seemed to have some grudges with the Holy Dragon City, which was why he had volunteered to lead the team personally and execute this plan. It was originally a simple mission, and now that the First Elder was personally leading the team, it could definitely be completed easily. But who would have thought that such an unforeseen event would occur? No matter what happened, get the First Elder here first. Read the latest stories and novelbin.com. After thinking up to this point, the crimson-armored leader let out a loud roar, and the speed of the mounted beasts increased once again. However, at this moment, several blinding lights suddenly appeared and blocked everyone's path. The galloping mounts were so frightened that they roared and stopped moving forward. The team was also forced to stop. The red-armored leader's riding skills were superb. With a little force, he controlled the panicking mount under him. It was only then that he had the time to examine the source of the strong light. Although the light was blinding, the red-armored leader could still see a few strange-looking behemoths behind the light. There was also a large row of black shadows. The red-armored leader was shocked. These people had appeared at the wrong time. "Who are you? Why are you blocking my way?" As the red-armored leader shouted, the Luqing warriors behind him all raised their sabers. Once they found something wrong, they would attack. A man's voice suddenly came from behind the bright light. It was rough and cold. "This is the Holy Dragon City's area of control. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. Go back to where you came from. If you cross the line, kill without mercy." At the same time, the sound of swords being unsheathed could be heard, and killing intent filled the air. The red-armored leader sneered and said disdainfully, "Who would dare to stop my Bloodsand City's blood-killing cavalry from going to places they want to go? A small level 3 city dares to be arrogant in front of me. You really don't know what's good for you. Make way immediately, or I'll exterminate you immediately." As the red-armored leader shouted, the hundreds of riders raised their bloody massacre sabers at the same time and got into a charging formation. With the huge impact of their mounts and the sharp bloody massacre battle blade, no one could stop their charge. The Bloodsand City's blood-killer cavalry had relied on countless battles, trampling on the corpses of their enemies to gain their fame. This was a real battle record, and it was definitely not something to brag about. At this moment, as long as the leader gave the order, they would attack without hesitation. Looking at the murderous bloody massacre cavalry, the people blocking the way behind the bright light were silent for a few seconds before they suddenly burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha, so you're the Bloodsand City's blood-slaughter cavalry, and that's all you've got? It seems that the mastermind behind the robbery of the caravan is really you bastards. I was just worried that I couldn't find the culprit, but I didn't expect you to come to my door so obediently. Since that's the case, don't you guys leave." Speaking up to this point was equivalent to shedding all pretenses of cordiality. Hearing this, the red-armored leader swung the saber in his hand. The hundreds of mounted beasts stomped on the ground with all their might, causing the ground to shake. Charge! After the red-armored leader shouted, he took the lead and led his men to charge forward. The momentum of this charge was unstoppable. Even if there was a mountain in the way, it would be smashed to pieces. The short distance of a few hundred meters was covered in an instant by the charging mount. The red-armored leader clenched his sword tightly, ready to cut the enemy in half. The crimson-armored leader was infatuated with the smooth feeling of the saber cutting through his body. However, at this moment, a rain-like sound came. The red-armored leader felt several hot things coming at him and drilling into one of his arms. He didn't need to look to know that his arm was crippled. The demonic soldier armor on his chest also seemed to have been hit by a heavy punch, making a few crisp sounds. The powerful impact caused the leader's vision to turn black, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, how could the red-armored leader not know that he had been seriously injured? The red-armored leader was shocked. The Holy Dragon City's flintlock had such power. However, what pained him the most was the tragic scene behind him. Ever since the gunshots were heard, the charging cavalrymen were in a mess. The screams of their men and the roars of their mounts could be heard. The charging cavalrymen burst out with a blinding blood mist and rolled down from their mounts like dumplings. How could a weak body withstand the trampling of a mount? In the blink of an eye, those injured riders were trampled into meat paste, dying a miserable death. The charge had just begun, but the losses they suffered were far beyond the imagination of the bloody massacre cavalry. Looking back at the path of the charge, there were corpses everywhere, their heads and tails almost joined together. Since the establishment of the Bloodslaughter Cavalry Regiment, when had they ever suffered such a tragic loss? After this battle, the blood-killing cavalry regiment would have to be rebuilt. The red-armored leader's heart was bleeding, but the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. He endured the pain from his wound and frantically drove the wounded mount under him. Blood kept dripping down the saber in his hand. As long as he charged into the enemy's camp, he would be able to wave his saber freely and reap the lives of these bastards. Brothers, kill! The enemy was right in front of him. The red-armored leader shouted in a hoarse voice, but only a few people responded. In the past, as long as he shouted these words, a deafening roar would definitely be heard from behind him. It was bold, and it would shock the enemy. But today, Ing Luo. The red-armored leader knew the reason for this, but it was precisely because of this that his heart ached even more. They were all brothers who had followed him for many years, but now they had all died on the battlefield because of an ordinary rescue operation. Damn Holy Dragon City, one day, I'll definitely slaughter all your residents to vent the hatred in my heart. With endless hatred, the red-armored leader finally broke through the rain of bullets and killed his way into the Holy Dragon City Army's line of defense. Hundreds of cavalrymen charged forward, but in the end, less than 50 blood-kill cavalrymen entered the Holy Dragon City's formation. EAD New Chapter S on no/v/e/ln.com. It was just a short distance of a few hundred meters, a distance that the mounts could cover in one charge, but they had lost 80% of the cavalry. This kind of terrifying casualty rate was far beyond what the red-armored leader could bear. Fortunately, they had already charged into the enemy formation and could now kill without restraint. Today, he must let these Holy Dragon City bastards have a taste of the power of the bloody slaughter warblade. The red-armored leader, who had lost an arm, dragged his long saber and began to search for the enemy. However, when he saw his surroundings clearly, he couldn't help but feel like he had been fooled. Other than a dozen strange-looking vehicles, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers were all gone. However, at the top of these vehicles, the red-armored leader still saw a dozen Holy Dragon City soldiers operating the mounted machine guns and grinning at them. "Ah, Ing Luo, go to hell!" The red-armored leader roared and rode his mount toward a wasteland war chariot. At this moment, countless black muzzles extended out of the carriage and pointed at the bloody massacre cavalry that were running around the wasteland war chariots. Bang! The eye-piercing flames were mixed with a loud noise as they locked onto the red-armored leader and the others. Countless small pellets flew in all directions, riddled the bodies of the bloody massacre cavalry with thousands of holes, and their mounts fell to the ground one after another. In just one wave of attacks, nearly half of the blood-slaughtered cavalry had been killed. The red-armored leader's face was covered in blood, and his body was in extreme pain. His mount had already fallen to the ground with serious injuries, and its fur was dyed red by blood. By the time he got up from the ground with great difficulty, all of the bloody massacre cavalry had already fallen to the ground. The mournful cries of the mounts and the screams of the heavily injured filled his ears, causing him to be in so much pain that he wished he could die. Looking at the bloodied corpses of his subordinates, the leader's eyes were bloodshot. After a series of sounds, fully armed Holy Dragon City warriors jumped down from the rear of the wasteland war chariot and looked at the red-armored leader coldly. A well-built man stepped out of the crowd and stopped a dozen steps away from the leader. The bloody massacre cavalry is so famous. They can kill whoever they want. But now, it seems that they are just SOSO. The burly man shook his head slightly as he spoke, his tone carrying a hint of mockery. Hearing this, the leader gritted his teeth and the veins on his forehead popped. He dragged the bloody massacre saber in his hand and walked towards the brawny man with great difficulty, leaving bloody footprints behind him. Holy Dragon City, F***CK your ancestors. Die! The red-armored leader let out an angry roar and slashed his saber toward Tai Seng. It seemed that the roar had exhausted the last bit of strength in his body, so the saber fell to the ground with a clang. The crimson-armored leader's knees went weak, and he knelt on the stone-filled ground. He lowered his head and blood dripped from his chin, dyeing the grass in front of him red. "Brothers, let's go! I'm coming, let's go!" The red-armored leader mumbled these words and then became silent. Tai Seng expressionlessly looked at the red-armored leader, and after a few seconds of silence, he waved his hand. "Clean up the battlefield. Send those who are not completely dead to their brothers." After issuing the order, Tyson lit a cigarette and looked up at the night sky. A faint rumbling sound could be heard, and a beam of light flashed in the sky. With one look, Tai Seng knew that it was the assault helicopter. With this thing in the battle, the group of black-robed cultivators would not be able to escape. Just as Tai Seng had predicted, ever since the assault helicopters arrived at the battlefield, the black-robed cultivators were in a desperate situation. The cannons boomed, and the Holy Dragon City cultivators continued to fire from above, causing the long-exhausted black-robed cultivators to lose their numbers. There were only 5 black-robed cultivators who were still running for their lives, and they were all injured. In a few minutes, the 5 black-robed cultivators would probably die as well. Bloodsand City's Grand Elder's heart was like dead ash. He was filled with regret for participating in this operation. Originally, an operation of this level did not require the participation of the powerful and influential people of Lucheng. However, because his illegitimate son had been killed, the Great Elder, who couldn't calm his anger, took the initiative to stand up and ask to be responsible for this operation. The first Elder's illegitimate son was the young master of Colossal Bone City. He had been caught by Tai Seng when he was trying to escape and then executed in public. If it wasn't for the young master of Giant Bone City begging for mercy before he died, claiming that he was the son of the Great Elder of Bloodsand City, the residents of Giant Bone City would probably still be in the dark. The overbearing city lord of Colossal Bone City had been cuckolded by his own brother. Both his son and brother had died at the hands of the Holy Dragon City. He had to take revenge. The Great Elder, who was bent on avenging his son, even planned to send troops to destroy Holy Dragon City and use the blood of Holy Dragon City's residents as a sacrifice to his son. It was just that his personal ability was limited, and he couldn't influence the city lord's decision on such a big matter as sending troops to attack the city, so he couldn't get his wish. This time, when he led the team to snatch the Holy Dragon City's application card, the Great Elder actually had his own selfish motives. He had been thinking about how to deal a fatal blow to the Holy Dragon City. Who would have thought that they would encounter such a thing before the plan was even executed? The cultivators under him were killed one after another, and he was being chased by the Holy Dragon City cultivators like a stray dog. This made the Great Elder extremely angry. However, he didn't dare to stop, because it was no different from sending himself to death. The anger in his heart had already accumulated to the limit, but it made the Great Elder continuously swear that after returning to Bloodsand City, even if he had to give up everything, he would ask the city lord to send troops and kill all of the Holy Dragon City. Another wave of bullets came, and the Great Elder quickly dodged, avoiding this fatal attack. However, the black-robed cultivators beside him were not so lucky. The large-caliber cannon bullets easily tore through their bodies, sending blood and flesh flying in all directions. The screams behind him didn't affect the Grand Elder's speed at all. In the past 10 minutes, he had maintained his high speed, which showed the endurance of a rank 5 cultivator. Soon, the blood-killing cavalry will be here soon. The Great Elder had been keeping track of the time in his heart the entire time, constantly looking into the distance. However, as time passed, the bloody killing cavalrymen that he had been waiting for did not appear. This made him feel a little uneasy. Based on the speed of the blood-kill cavalry, they should have arrived long ago. They haven't appeared for such a long time. Could it be that something has happened to the bloody massacre cavalry? As soon as this thought appeared, it quickly filled the head elder's mind, causing his movements to slow down. The Holy Dragon City cultivators piloting the military helicopters seized this opportunity and launched a series of attacks. Ah! A bullet hit the Great Elder's shoulder, cracking the demonic soldier armor under his black robe. The huge impact made the Great Elder spit out blood. The arm that was wearing the chain armor of the demon soldiers was hit by the bullet. Although it was not broken, it was also turned into a strange shape. Fresh blood flowed down from the gaps in the armor. Die! The Great Elder roared. He used his intact arm to pull out a demon weapon dagger from his waist and threw it at the assault helicopter in the air. This was the Grand Elder's attack filled with hatred. Both its power and speed were extremely shocking. The Holy Dragon City cultivator piloting the helicopter dodged in a hurry, but the dagger still hit the armed helicopter and pierced through the metal shell of the helicopter. The pilot, who had dodged the attack, was about to counterattack when he realized that the Great Elder had stopped running and was standing in place in a daze. Piercing lights lit up from the front, and more than a dozen wasteland war chariots lined up in an impassable line of defense, blocking the escape route of the Great Elder. In the area illuminated by the lights, countless corpses were lying on the ground. They were the blood-killing cavalry that the First Elder had been waiting for. Another roar sounded, and Qianlong finally caught up on his motorcycle. He scoffed coldly and jumped off. At this point, there was no way to escape. The First Elder, who was being surrounded, did not move at all, but his eyes under the mask were filled with madness. Since we can't escape, we'll all die together. The Great Elder roared madly and took out a cantaloupe-sized metal ball from his pocket. Then, he smashed it on the ground. No one present knew what the Great Elder of Bloodsand City had taken out. However, just from his mad roar, one could guess that this thing was not simple. Tai Seng and Qianlong's expressions changed at the same time as a huge sense of danger struck them, causing the two of them to yell out in unison, "Get down!" The distance between the two sides was more than 20 meters. It was impossible to stop the Great Elder's action. A disaster was already unavoidable. However, at this critical moment, a glimmer of light suddenly appeared from the distant horizon, approaching at an incredible speed. Just as the metal ball was about to hit the ground, the Grand Elder suddenly felt a trace of fear in the depths of his soul. It was as if something he couldn't resist was heading straight for him. Just as he thought of this, he saw a golden stream of light pass through the First Elder's body, then turn back in midair and pass through again. Pass through, turn back, pass through again, turn back again. That stream of light was freakishly fast, and actually formed a light barrier, enveloping the head elder within. What the crowd did not know was that the speed of the stream of light was extremely fast. What they saw was actually just an afterimage. The Great Elder, who was about to hit the ground with the metal ball, was now in a fixed position, but the metal ball in his hand could no longer be smashed down. Ka-ba! The mask on the Great Elder's face shattered, revealing a twisted face of madness and despair, with a trace of fear in his eyes. Walala! As the mask fell, the Grand Elder's body immediately shattered into countless small pieces and piled on the ground with a crash. Tai Sing and Qianlong climbed up from the ground and walked to the pile of meat, exchanging a confused look. What's going on? How did this guy suddenly die? Tai Sing looked at the ground and frowned. It's a good thing he's dead. Otherwise, we'd be in deep trouble if that metal ball hit us. Qianlong, on the other hand, had a look of lingering fear on his face. It was clear that he had also been quite frightened just now. That's right. Hearing this, Tai Sing nodded his head. When he saw the metal ball earlier, all the hair on his body stood up. This was a cultivator's intuition when their life was in danger, and it was extremely accurate. Moreover, after absorbing the soul crystals, their perception had become more sensitive. Therefore, the two of them firmly believed that this metal ball, which the Great Elder had taken out in a moment of desperation, was definitely an extremely terrifying thing. However, what was that stream of light? How could it be so terrifying? The rank 5 Grand Elder of Bloodsand City was cut into countless pieces by the light in an extremely short moment. The two of them looked at each other, and the figure of a person appeared in their minds at the same time. Don't tell me it's Qianqian? Right at this moment, Tangjin's voice suddenly sounded out from Qianlong's walkie-talkie. Bring that metal ball back. Remember to be extremely careful, because I suspect that it's some kind of super bomb that we don't know about. Qianlong agreed and carefully wrapped the metal ball in his clothes before placing it in a leather bag. Let's pack up and retreat. After the two of them exchanged a few words, they instructed their men to clean up the battlefield and then returned home. In the silent night, the moonlight scattered across the wilderness. A long line of carriages sped past, heading straight for Holy Dragon City. By the time they returned to Holy Dragon City, it was already close to midnight. Tangjin was currently sitting in the city lord's hall, quietly reading an ancient book. After Qianlong and Tai Sing walked in, Tangjin kept the book and smiled at the two of them. Well done, you've all worked hard. The two of them did not dare to claim credit and quickly shook their heads to decline. After Tangjin and the other two sat down on the sofa, the female attendant outside the door served them a drink. It was a fruit juice squeezed from a strange wild fruit. Bloodsand City has suffered heavy losses this time, and they definitely won't let this matter rest, so we must be prepared for battle. However, after this battle, they'll definitely be wary of our weapons. If they don't have the confidence to win, they won't send out their troops easily. This will give us enough time to deal with the situation and also allow us to gather enough information. After Tangjin spoke up to this point, he glanced at Qianlong. You'll be in charge of the intelligence gathering and movement monitoring work in Bloodsand City. Qianlong nodded, but didn't say anything. After taking a sip of the fruit juice, Tangjin looked at Tyson. I estimate that before sending troops, Bloodsand City will definitely harass the merchant group, so the number of patrols can be appropriately increased. Visit en Velben. CM for EU ovals. Once they found any looters, there was no need to leave any survivors, they would be wiped out completely. We also need to increase the defense of Holy Dragon City and the commercial district. We can't let the cultivators of Blood Sand City come in and cause trouble. Yes. Tai Sing replied with a confident expression. Leave that metal sphere behind. You two can go rest. After the two of them left, Tang Jin put the leather bag with the metal ball into the storage space and quickly drove away from the Holy Dragon City. After running for a distance in the wilderness, Tang Jin finally stopped the car and took out the leather bag. After removing the wrapped clothes, the exquisitely made metal ball that was still stained with blood and minced meat was revealed before Tang Jin's eyes. With just a glance, Tang Jin confirmed that this thing was not a product of the Lu City world, but from a random building. This metal ball was made of an unknown metal. The craftsmanship was exquisite and exquisite. At the same time, there was a line of strange text carved on the surface. Tang Jin activated the application and easily deciphered the content expressed by the words. It turned out to be a special production number, but before he understood the meaning of the characters, this set of numbers was not of much use. The only thing that could be proven was that this metal ball was very likely to be mass-produced. Judging from how the Great Elder of Blood Sand City had acted when he had taken it out, this metal ball definitely had terrifying destructive power, and it had already been used and proven. It was precisely because First Elder understood the destructive power of this metal ball that he was prepared to drag Tai Seng and the others down with him when he self-destructed. Tang Jin, who was monitoring the battlefield, saw this point. That was why he did not hesitate to use the one-time payment application. Super Flying Sword. Use a flying sword to attack a target within the map, instantly arriving without a trace. Price, 50,000 brain beads per use. Although this kind of flying sword was expensive, it was indeed extremely powerful. The Great Elder of Blood Sand City, who was about to detonate the metal ball, was instantly cut into a pile of minced meat by the flying sword. However, he clearly remembered that in the introduction to its use, it was said that this super flying sword was invisible and hard to see with the naked eye. So why was there a stream of light that kept flashing? After carefully reading the introduction, Tang Jin fainted. It turned out that this stream of light was actually a decorative special effect of the flying sword. Other than the monochrome stream of light, there were also the 7-colored stream of light, the galaxy stream of light, the gradient stream of light, and so on. With these streams of light, it could be guaranteed that when using the super flying sword, the visual effect would be extremely gorgeous. If he didn't want this light, he could also choose to turn it off. That way, he wouldn't be able to see the flying sword with the naked eye. Tang Jin ridiculed in his heart before turning his attention back to the metal ball. If he had an identification card in his hand, he could definitely determine the origin of the metal ball. As he thought of this, Tang Jin immediately opened the application store and refreshed the prizes on the wheel. He continuously drew lots. Tang Jin stared at the lucky wheel and studied the prizes that had been refreshed. Ever since his phone had been upgraded, he had received more than 30 prizes every day from the Forced Lucky Draw. These prizes were all cards with various functions, which weren't of much use to Tang Jin. And among these prizes, there were still some wondrous cards similar to sex change cards. For example, the 2 cards in Tang Jin's hands. Long Tail Card. You can grow a tail after using it. The appearance can be set freely. Exclusive card for the Wheel of Fortune. Wings Card. A pair of wings will appear after use. The appearance can be set freely. After use, it will cause changes to the user's body shape. Exclusive card for the Wheel of Fortune. Just like the sex change card, both cards were permanently effective. But even if he beat Jin Tang to death, he wouldn't use those 2 strange cards. He didn't want to grow a strange tail and have huge pectoral muscles. Could that kind of body still be considered human? He put the 2 cards back into his storage space and thought that if someone really planned to become a birdman with a long tail in the future, Tangjin would not mind giving them 2 cards for free. He really wanted to see what would happen after using the card. Turning his gaze to the lucky wheel, Tangjin tore the lucky card and continued to draw. Different from the previous draws, the upgraded Wheel of Fortune allowed him to refresh the prizes if he was not satisfied with them. However, after throwing in tens of thousands of brain beads, he did not draw any identification cards. Instead, he drew more and more random cards. Tangjin was so angry that he wanted to curse. This damn thing, it just didn't give you anything you wanted. This King lucky wheel. After patiently throwing in another 20,000 brain beads, the roulette finally refreshed with the item that Tangjin had been dreaming of. Appraisal I, Beginner, card. Able to determine the basic information of most items. Lucky Wheel exclusive card. Tangjin couldn't help but burst into laughter after reading the card's introduction. He had only wanted an appraisal card, but who would have thought that he would encounter such a big surprise? Even if he had to invest 1,000,000 brain beads, Tangjin still had to get this card. Tangjin didn't hesitate to throw his brain into it and block the other empty spaces, leaving only 10 prizes. Feeling a little uncertain, Tangjin took out the last 2 lucky cards and tore them both to use. Activate, draw. Hard work paid off. Tangjin only drew once and successfully drew the Eye of Appraisal, basic, card. After taking the card in his hand and examining it a few times, Tangjin gently tore it open. The card turned into a stream of light and flew up. It slowly merged into Tangjin's eyes and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Tangjin did not make any other movements during the entire process. Tangjin rubbed his somewhat itchy eyes. He took out the metal ball and focused his attention on it. Just then, a set of subtitles popped up in front of him. The Torobo People's standard star-destroying cluster bomb, Bullet, has extremely powerful explosive power and can cover an area of 1,000 square kilometers. When the bullet is used alone, it can destroy ground targets within a square kilometer. Tangjin was dumbstruck when he saw the introduction on the subtitles. Even without looking at the identification information, Tangjin could already determine that this metal ball was definitely not a product of the Lucheng world. However, Tangjin had never imagined that a single bullet from the parent seed bullet would actually possess such a terrifying might. If these star-destroying cluster bombs were dropped on a country in the original world, it would definitely be easy to wipe out the country. This kind of terrifying might had truly exceeded Tangjin's expectations. He had never heard of such a weapon in his original world, so the Teroboros people who made the bombs were most likely creatures from other planes. And this bomb was likely to have first appeared in the wild building, only falling into the hands of the Great Elder of Bloodsand City later. After being in the world of Lucheng for so long, a terrifying weapon that surpassed the technology of his original world had finally appeared. A strong sense of danger assaulted him. Tangjin did not know how many more of these bombs were in Bloodsand City. Even if there was only one, it would pose a great threat to Holy Dragon City. A cold glint flickered within Tangjin's eyes. If Bloodsand City really had such a terrifying bomb, he could only strike first and gain the upper hand, completely wiping out Bloodsand City. Tangjin took out a small box and kept the terrifying bomb. He then turned around and returned to the Holy Dragon City. He also had to check the body of the Great Elder of Bloodsand City to see if he had any information about the bomb. He hoped that the number of such bombs was limited, or things would be really bad. After returning to the Holy Dragon City, Tangjin immediately ordered his assistant to bring over the relics of the Great Elder of Bloodsand City. It didn't take long for the assistant to come in with a pile of bloody rags. Tangjin was so vexed that he continuously smacked his head after seeing these worn-out items. When he controlled the flying sword to kill Bloodsand City's Great Elder, Tangjin still felt extremely satisfied. He hoped that the enemy wouldn't have a chance to turn the tables. As a result, the great elder of Bloodsand City was cut into pieces, and his clothes were not spared either. If it wasn't for Qianlong's meticulous nature to clean up all the pieces of cloth, the others probably wouldn't even care. 1. He had no choice but to solve the puzzle. After picking out the useless pieces of clothes, there was only a pile of tattered clothes left in front of Tangjin. Among them, there were over a dozen pieces of monster skin that were stained with blood that attracted Tangjin's attention. After taking out all the monster skins, Tangjin carefully unfolded and pieced them together. He confirmed that this was a map. The map was drawn very intricately. Tangjin looked at it carefully for a while and suddenly realized that the terrain was somewhat familiar. That's strange, where have I seen this terrain before? Tangjin frowned and thought for a moment as he looked at the streets and buildings depicted on the map. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. He had already thought of a place, but he still needed to make a comparison. Tangjin switched to the map view and quickly shifted his gaze. Finally, he locked onto the ruins of Black Rock City. He then slowly moved along the ruins. The place that entered Tangjin's field of vision was the super ruins that he had entered many times before. The area of the super ruins was very large. Many places were covered by clouds and fog. Even if he used the map view, Tangjin was unable to see the entire area clearly. What Tangjin needed to do was to determine if the terrain of the ruins matched the map. After carefully searching for a while, Tangjin finally discovered a building that matched the map. After comparing the two, he was sure that the super ruins were on the map. However, this dilapidated building was only the outer area drawn on the map. The place marked with a red dot on the map was located in the central area of the super ruins. Due to the clouds and fog, Tangjin was unable to see the situation there clearly. Tangjin looked at it for a moment before frowning slightly. There were many rumors about this ruin among the wanderers, most of which were related to wealth and danger. Tangjin had once analyzed the architectural style of the ruins. Although most of them were severely damaged, he could still confirm that they came from the same place. In other words, they were super wild buildings that appeared together in the world of Luqing. Your F48 stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. Such a large building was truly shocking. The refuge of the Glitter Gold race was nothing compared to it. It was also because of this that Tangjin had always believed that there was a huge secret hidden within the ruins. The appearance of this map strengthened Tangjin's determination to explore the ruins. Bring some people over tomorrow morning. I want to see what good things are in the place marked by the Great Elder of Bloodsand City. Tangjin lit a cigarette and quietly thought in his heart. After Tangjin woke up in the morning, he walked around the valley and felt that the temperature had dropped quite a bit. In the area where the Holy Dragon City was located, the change in temperature was not very big, so this situation was very unusual. Perhaps it was because the cold moon disaster was about to arrive that the temperature suddenly dropped. After having a simple breakfast, Tangjin summoned the Thousand Dragons technique that he was currently cultivating. Get ready and bring 20 cultivators with you. We're going to the center of the super junkyard to take a look. Now that you have the storage card, you can prepare more ammunition. Qianlong nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He returned to the cave and began preparing. After about half an hour, Tangjin led 20 Holy Dragon City cultivators across the salty river and drove the Wasteland War Chariot straight to the super ruins. The car sped all the way, and under the gazes of groups of wanderers, they finally arrived at the area where the super ruins were. At the entrance of the super junkyard, several exploration teams were resting. When the Holy Dragon City's car arrived, the wanderers immediately stood up nervously. They looked at the Holy Dragon City's cultivators who had jumped out of the car with fear in their eyes. All the wanderers who made a living in this area had some understanding of the Holy Dragon City. They knew that the newcomers were cultivators from the Holy Dragon City just by looking at the ferocious-looking wasteland war chariots. The wanderers were not only envious of the city's residents, but they were also repulsed and afraid of them. At that moment, they looked at the Holy Dragon City cultivators with a hint of vigilance. Tangjin did not care about the wanderers. He raised his hand and kept the wasteland war chariot behind him into his storage space. Then, he walked toward the ruins with large strides. Two Holy Dragon City cultivators immediately walked out to explore the way. Their eyes under their masks flickered, constantly sizing up the surrounding environment in case of any accidents. These cultivators were all holding carefully maintained automatic rifles and carrying sharp sabers on their backs. Whether it was in close or long-range combat, the Holy Dragon City cultivators had extremely strong combat power. The group walked on the broken street, gradually approaching the center of the ruins. Behind Tangjin's group, there were two exploration teams following from a distance. They had been sizing them up. The combat strength of the cultivators in Luqing far exceeded that of an ordinary exploration team. With Tangjin and the others clearing the way, they could take the opportunity to get closer to the deeper areas. If they were lucky enough to discover a building rich in resources, these exploration teams could become rich overnight. Tangjin ignored those greedy fellows. Instead, he continued to observe the surrounding buildings. He would occasionally switch to the map view in order to prevent any hidden monsters from ambushing him. After walking for some distance, a gray mist began to appear in front of them, blocking their vision. Tangjin stopped his footsteps. He looked at the fog in front of him and was deep in thought. In the past, Tangjin's cultivation level was low and he had little experience. He had returned to the ruins several times but was still unable to figure out the true origin of the gray fog. However, Tangjin saw a trace of abnormality when he came into contact with the gray fog again. This wasn't any ordinary mist at all. It was a strange mist that would only be produced after a large number of Yin-type spiritual bodies gathered. He didn't expect that there would be such a secret hidden in the ruins. Tangjin didn't care about the spirits and ghosts that ordinary people feared. In fact, he was used to it. After all, there was a large group of beautiful female ghosts right under his nose, tricking people into using their souls to get a loan. He activated the Spirit Body Seeker, and Tangjin's vision, which was blocked by the gray fog, suddenly became much clearer. Dozens of blurry spirit bodies appeared in Tangjin's eyes. These spirit bodies were already on the verge of collapse. Perhaps in a few years, they would completely dissipate. Tangjin did not know why these spirit bodies would appear here. However, he clearly knew that the ruins were not as simple as he had imagined. It was also because of the Yin energy's existence that the wanderers who entered the gray fog kept getting lost, and very few people could reach the central region. If it wasn't for the fact that the mental power of an independent cultivator far exceeded that of an ordinary person, it wouldn't take long for them to go completely crazy. Tangjin could not help but frown when he thought of this. He wasn't afraid of these spirits and Yin energy, but how could the cultivators behind him resist them? After thinking for a while, Tangjin took out dozens of soul crystals and handed them to the Holy Dragon City cultivators behind him. If you feel that something is wrong, immediately absorb this soul crystal. If it doesn't work, you'll have to return the way you came. The reason why ordinary people would be affected by Yin energy was that their souls were not strong enough. After absorbing the soul crystal, it could strengthen the power of the soul. The effect was especially obvious on the first day of absorption. However, whether or not this would be effective still needed to be verified. After Tangjin warned him, he took a step into the gray fog region. The exploration team that had been following them were immediately dumbfounded when they saw the scene. Are these Holy Dragon City cultivators crazy? They actually dare to enter the gray fog region? Yeah, aren't they afraid that they won't be able to come out? I guess they have some special means to not be afraid of the gray fog. That's why they dared to go in. The wild cultivators discussed animatedly. They wanted to go in and take advantage of the situation, but they were also afraid of getting lost in the gray fog. After discussing for a while, these wild cultivators finally made up their minds and prepared to try to follow them for a distance. If there were any abnormalities, they would immediately retreat. Under the temptation of wealth, these wild cultivators also went all out. Tangjin did not know the thoughts of these wild cultivators. Otherwise, he would definitely scoff. The strangeness of the scene energy was far beyond the imagination of these wild cultivators. If he knew when to stop, he might not be affected too much, but if he continued to be greedy, he might lose his life here. However, at the edge of the gray fog, where Yin energy was slightly weaker, any valuable resources had already been taken away by the fearless wanderers. If he wanted to gain something, he had to continue going deeper. If one intended to obtain wealth in this strange place, they would likely have to exchange their lives for it. After Tangjin's group entered the gray fog, the wandering spirit bodies were continuously attracted over due to the yang energy on everyone's bodies. Thousand Dragon and the others did not have any magical mobile phone applications, nor did they have any holy master skills like the Eye of Truth, so they naturally could not see the spirits pouncing at them. If an ordinary person were to encounter such a situation, they would probably be immediately affected and fall into a state of mental confusion. Because Qianlong and the others had stronger spirit energy, they weren't affected by these weak spirits, but the cold and gloomy feeling made them uncomfortable. Tangjin completely ignored these weak spirit bodies. This was because they would quickly spring away as though they had been electrocuted the moment they got close to Tangjin's body. Those spirit bodies that couldn't dodge in time would even directly dissipate into nothing. The Lord Cultivator's soul power was extremely strong. To these weak spirits, it was like a ball of fire that could easily burn them to ashes. However, as everyone went deeper, more and more skeletons appeared under their feet. There were human skeletons, alien skeletons, and countless monsters. Most of them had already weathered and were scattered messily on the ground. A light step on them would turn them into powder. Qianlong and the rest could only see a small area under their feet. However, in Tangjin's eyes, it was a terrifying sea of white bones. Discover EU chapters at novelby.co. However, there was still a question in Tangjin's heart. What was it that had gnawed at the flesh and blood of these corpses? Could it be that there were some terrifying monsters in the gray fog? Everyone, be careful. There might be monsters here. Tangjin took out a demonic bow and a sharp arrow from his storage space to kill any monsters that might appear. Compared to the loud rifle, the noiseless bow was more practical because it would not easily attract the attention of the monsters. Just as Thousand Dragon and the others loaded the bullets, a sharp whistling sound suddenly rang out. Tangjin's eyes focused. The sharp arrow placed on the bowstring was suddenly shot out. At the same time, a scream was heard. A strange monster that was floating in the air fell to the ground in front of him with a plop. It was a strange-looking creature. It was grayish-white in color and looked like a big balloon that had been shot. It was lying on the ground. There was no blood in its body, only the gray mist that was constantly dissipating. Tangjin used his foot to kick the monster's corpse and discovered that its outer skin was extremely tough. If it wasn't for the demon soldier Bao Bao's high destructive power, he might not have been able to shoot this monster. Tangjin carefully sized up the monster's corpse before he stood up in doubt and frowned. This monster is not the main culprit of the gnawing. It's just an ordinary monster in the gray fog. After once again sizing up his surroundings, Tangjin continued to move forward according to the marks on the map. There were very few people who set foot in this gray fog area, and the corpses on the ground had also become fewer. However, the cultivation level of the previous owners of these skeletons was obviously much higher than that of the skeletons at the edge. If one were to search the remains carefully, one would find a surprise from time to time. For example, a brain, a few weapons, and a mess of miscellaneous items and ores in the rotten backpack. They had been left here for many years, and no one had ever cleaned them up. The brain remains at the edge of the area had long been cleaned up by the exploration team who were not afraid of death. As for the area under their feet, because of the strength of the spirit bodies, few people came close to rummage through it. Anyone who could enter this area was basically a high-level cultivator. They all had different purposes, so why would they waste time picking up trash? Tangjin similarly did not have the time to rummage through the corpses. He had to race against time. The gray fog would unconsciously affect cultivators. By the time you realized that something was wrong, you would have already fallen into the fog. When they passed by a pitch-black building, Tangjin discovered a group of monsters with hunched bodies that were aimlessly wandering around. This should be a wild building that had not been cleaned up, but Tangjin was not interested in exploring it for the time being. Tangjin became more and more curious as to what exactly was hidden in the central region. Compared to the weak spirit bodies at the border, the spirit bodies around Tangjin had already gradually become clearer. The Yin energy they carried was also becoming stronger. Although Tangjin didn't care about it, Qianlong and the others were clearly feeling uncomfortable. This type of spirit body was already able to affect Qianlong and the others, causing them to fall into a daze and occasionally experience a brief hallucination. You guys can absorb the soul crystals now. See how it goes. Qianlong and the others immediately took out the soul crystals and absorbed them. His originally chaotic mind immediately cleared up, and the illusions that appeared from time to time quickly disappeared. Seeing Qianlong and the others jolted in spirit, Tangjin also confirmed that this soul crystal was indeed effective. However, at this stage, Qianlong and the others were no longer suitable to follow Tangjin. You guys wait here, I'll go in and take a look myself. Tangjin was about to leave after he finished speaking when he was stopped by Qianlong. City Lord, it's too dangerous inside. You'd better not go further in. The entire Holy Dragon City was sustained by Tangjin alone. If he were to encounter any danger, even 1,000 deaths would not be enough to forgive his crime. So when he heard this, he immediately stood up to stop it. Tangjin knew what Qianlong was thinking. However, he merely smiled and shook his head. Although this area is dangerous, it's not a threat to me, so you can rest assured. If I encounter any danger, I will immediately retreat. After he finished speaking, Tangjin's body flashed and disappeared. Qianlong sighed helplessly. Everyone, pay attention. Be careful of monster attacks. Hearing this, the cultivators immediately raised their weapons and looked around vigilantly. After Tangjin and Qianlong's group separated, they walked for a distance before suddenly stopping. A few dozen meters in front of him, there was a giant spirit body that was 4 to 5 meters tall. It had a human head and a beast's body, looking very ferocious and strange. Compared to the other spirit bodies, this giant spirit body was extremely solid. When its feet landed on the ground, it even brought up a trace of dust. Those spirit bodies without a physical body could not be compared to it at all. Tangjin suddenly had a feeling that this gigantic spirit body was different from the spirit bodies he had seen before. The aura that it emitted was more like a monster. After he thought of this, Tangjin immediately activated the monster detector and aimed it at the giant spirit body. A set of words popped up, confirming Tangjin's guess. Soul-eating monster, level 5 monster, feeds on Yin energy, fears energy attacks, normal physical attacks are ineffective. As expected, the giant spirit body was a monster. Ordinary weapons couldn't hurt this soul-eating monster, so he could only rely on his phone. When Tangjin killed the Spirit Brain Corpse King, he had downloaded an application that specialized in killing spirit bodies. Demon Annihilating Rune Carving. Demon Annihilating runes can be carved on weapons, which are perfect for dealing with soul-eating monsters. Vist and Velben. CM for new updates. Tangjin took out a demonic war blade from his storage space. His finger brushed across the blade, and a demon-killing rune that was flashing with fluorescent light instantly appeared. With the war blade in his hand, Tangjin's feet suddenly exerted force and he rushed to the front of the soul-eating monster. Without waiting for the Spirit Devourer to react, Tangjin had already jumped up and slashed the Spirit Devourer's neck. It was not worth it to rely on Tangjin's sneak attack to win against a level 5 monster. The attack power of a Lord-tier cultivator was extremely shocking. This saber, which was infused with a huge amount of energy, carried a destructive force and ruthlessly cut into the body of the soul-eating monster. As the blade entered its body, the soul-eating monster let out a roar that shook one's soul, then fell to the ground. With the death of the soul-eating monster, its body immediately turned into a stream of light and was absorbed by a dark blue bead of brain that appeared on its head. The huge body of the soul-eating monster disappeared in the blink of an eye. Tangjin walked to the front of the head and picked it up with the tip of his knife. He held it in his hand and carefully examined it. The brain of this soul-eating monster was different from ordinary monsters. Through the blue shell of the brain, Tangjin could clearly see a miniature soul-eating monster floating and swimming in the brain. This kind of strange brain immediately aroused Tangjin's interest. However, now was not the time to study it in detail. Therefore, Tangjin kept the brain pearl and once again pounced forward. After walking for less than 1,000 meters, another soul-devouring monster appeared. Tangjin raised his hand and directly killed it with a slash of his blade. Tangjin inhaled a breath of cold air when he looked forward again. Dozens of soul-gnawing monsters were constantly wandering in the gray fog, swallowing the gray fog from time to time, causing their bodies to constantly solidify. The central area that Tangjin planned to head to was the rear area of these soul-eating monsters. If he were to rush over rashly, he would definitely be surrounded by these soul-eating monsters. Tangjin did not wish to waste time here. Tangjin already felt a trace of discomfort when he arrived at this place. Illusions would occasionally flash before his eyes. If it wasn't for Tangjin's shocking mental strength, he might have already fallen into an illusion and would not be able to extricate himself. The Grand Elder of Bloodsand City was only at rank 5. How could he enter the central area? There must be something he didn't know about. Tangjin took out a handful of soul crystals from his storage space and quickly absorbed them. His spirit was shaken. After locking onto the central area from the map's perspective, Tangjin resolutely activated the map teleportation plugin and disappeared from the spot in the blink of an eye. When he reappeared, he had already passed through the areas sealed off by the soul-eating monsters and was standing in front of a huge metal wreckage. Tangjin was dumbstruck with just a glance at the wreckage. Tangjin raised his head and looked at the huge wreckage in front of him. He felt as though he was standing in front of a huge mountain. In the gray fog, the huge wreckage with a metallic texture sank into the ground, leaving only a small part exposed. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. But this small section on the ground was still bigger than the size of 2 holy dragon cities. Only the heavens knew how big the metal remains were, including the part that had sunk into the ground. Tangjin was like an ant facing a prehistoric dinosaur as he stood in front of the metallic remains. The difference in size between the two was too great. Tangjin's heart beat wildly as he looked at the outer shell of the metallic remains that was filled with a sci-fi texture. His eyes were filled with shock and wild joy. This thing was definitely not a product of the building world, but from a high-tech plane. If he could master the weapon technology in this wreckage, Holy Dragon City's strength would rise to a terrifying level. Just thinking about it made him excited. Although his heart was unusually excited, Tangjin still did not rashly charge in. Instead, he carefully observed his surroundings. After watching for a while, Tangjin indeed discovered an abnormality. Compared to the other parts of the ruins, the gray fog here was much thicker. However, the place where the fog was most concentrated was actually a super large pit near the wreckage. The gray fog inside was almost solid. Tangjin tried to take a few steps towards the large pit. However, he could faintly sense a trace of danger. The closer he was to the large pit, the more obvious the dangerous aura became. There was no doubt that there was a terrifying monster hidden in the huge pit. Its strength was far above Tangjin's. Tangjin did not dare to continue to approach. Instead, he carefully retreated, afraid that he would anger this hidden monster. Ka-ba. A soft sound came from under his feet. It didn't seem like a big movement, but in this silent area, it was no less than a clap of thunder. A trace of cold sweat immediately flowed down Tangjin's forehead. This was because he had sensed a strange mental energy lock onto his position the moment the voice sounded. At this moment, Tangjin had already confirmed that the monster in the large pit was definitely much more powerful than him. Just the aura that was leaking out was sufficient to cause Tangjin's hair to stand on end. He had already made preparations. If the situation turned bad, he would immediately activate the teleportation and return to his original world. Just as Tangjin was extremely nervous and was prepared to escape at any moment, that terrifying aura suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never existed. However, Tangjin was certain that the terrifying monster was at the bottom of the huge pit. It was hidden in the area where the gray fog was the thickest. However, looking at its actions, it seemed to be unwilling to acknowledge him. Tangjin heaved a sigh of relief. He slowly looked at the object that had produced the sound under his feet, only to discover that it was the remains of a foreign race being. His foot had just broken the leg bone of the corpse, which was why it had made a crisp sound. Tangjin fell into deep thought as he looked at the remains on the ground. None of the cultivators who could enter this central area were simple. Perhaps he could find something useful on the remains? When Tangjin thought up to this point, he immediately squatted down and began to search the vicinity of the wreckage. It didn't take long for Tangjin to find a backpack made of monster skin in the soil. The inside was full. With the bag in his hand, Tangjin returned to the metal wreckage and opened the bag to check. The leather bag was most likely made from the leather of a Lord-tier monster, which was why it had not corroded after being buried in the soil for so many years. After opening the bag, a messy pile of items appeared before Tangjin's eyes. Most of them were unable to see their specific use. However, judging from their material, they seemed to come from the inside of the metal wreckage. Tangjin poured the contents of the bag onto the ground and rummaged through it. A thick leather notebook appeared in front of him. After keeping the other items, Tangjin opened his laptop. The pages of the notebook were filled with fly-sized characters of other races, and some places even had illustrations. After starting the application, the translated text appeared in front of Tangjin, covering the original text for his convenience. Tangjin looked at it for a while and figured out the origin of the notebook's owner. It turned out that the foreign race cultivator who had died here was named Biu Li. Just like Tangjin, he had also reached the Lord grade. However, compared to Tangjin, who had just entered the Lord tier, Biu Li's cultivation was even higher. He had already reached the second stage of the Lord tier. He called him a 2-star Lord. In terms of rank, a 2-star Horde leader was equivalent to a rank 7 cultivator, and their strength was extremely powerful. As a 2-star Horde leader, Biu Li loved to explore wild buildings. He had left footprints all over the continent, and he and his companions had searched for those strange and mysterious wild buildings everywhere. In his notebook, he had recorded many locations of wild buildings, as well as Biu Li's and his companions' adventures. Bruley had mentioned in his notebook that there were actually many special wild buildings on the continent, but most of them were located in dangerous places, and ordinary people had no chance of seeing them. However, the more wild buildings there were, the more abundant and valuable the resources were. Some of the items were even worth cities. Bruley and the others had once obtained a few items from a large tower in the wild and sold them at a high price of 20 million brain beads in a high-class city. However, the monsters in this kind of special wild building were all abnormally strong. Even as a 2-star horde leader, Bruley would often encounter a crisis of death. When they encountered a wild building of this danger, they would only take some items inside and never dare to have any ideas about the building's foundation. The metallic remains in front of Tangjin was the last special wild building that Bruley had explored. They had explored the place for 3 days and encountered many powerful monsters. At the same time, each of them had been given a very powerful weapon. However, just as they were about to leave, they suddenly encountered a terrifying monster. It was guarding outside the metal wreckage, blocking them from leaving. This monster was incomparably powerful. Even though Bruley and his companions attacked it together, they were still unable to break through the monster's defense. The strangest thing was that the monster didn't seem to intend to kill Bruley and the others. It only wanted to imprison them here. Bruley and the others were extremely anxious because they had already run out of supplies. If they were unable to escape from the metallic wreckage, they were destined to die here. After being trapped for a few days, Bruley and the others ran out of ammunition and supplies, and finally decided to fight to the death. Each of them was given a bomb that they had gotten from the metal wreckage, and then they split up to break out. If anyone was unlucky enough to be targeted by the monster, they would detonate the bomb and die together with the monster, creating a chance for the others to escape. The text stopped abruptly here. It seemed that Bruley was the one who had died with the monster. While he was reading the notebook, Tangjin discovered that there was a human cultivator among Bruley's companions. His strength was similar to Bruley's. It was likely that after Bruley detonated the bomb, his human companion had successfully escaped from this place. In that case, was there a connection between this human cultivator and the Great Elder of Bloodsand City? Was the bomb Bruley used to take the monster down with him the bullet of the destructive star cluster bomb that the Great Elder of Bloodsand City had taken out before he died? Was the crater in front of him the work of that bullet? But why was there such a terrifying gray fog? Could the terrifying monster in the pit be the one that had stopped Bruley back then? Tangjin's heart was filled with questions. However, he could only slowly search for an answer. Tangjin turned his head and glanced at the enormous metal remains. He inhaled a deep breath of air and walked in. The interior of the metal fragment was extremely vast, and he felt extremely small within it. Tangjin sized up his surroundings and discovered that the area around the entrance had been severely damaged. There were many signs of violent demolition. Picking up a thin piece of metal from the metal floor, Tangjin discovered that it was very light and extremely tough. Even though it had been buried in the soil for many years, it still looked as good as new. He wondered what kind of effect it would have if it was used to make weapons. Tangjin picked up some more metal from the ground and kept it in his storage space. He was prepared to hand it over to Furnace Hammer for him to study it in detail. Tangjin was hesitating if he should continue to go deeper as he looked at the tunnel that was slanted downwards. Tangjin had basically confirmed that the metal bomb's origin came from this metal wreckage. Based on the assumption that each person had one bomb, Bruley's team had brought no more than 5 bombs out, one of which had fallen into his own hands. After so many years, who knew where the bombs had gone? Therefore, Tangjin did not need to worry at all that this bomb would pose a threat to Holy Dragon City. The purpose of this trip had been achieved. If he wanted to go deeper, he was bound to bear a certain risk. Even with the strength of a 2-star horde leader like Bruley and the others, they still ran into walls everywhere in this metallic wreckage. Tangjin was all alone and did not think that he could be much stronger than them. Should he wait until his cultivation level was a little higher before continuing to explore? However, this thought was immediately rejected by Tangjin the moment it appeared. Ever since he entered the world of Luqing, when had he ever backed down in the face of difficulties? When faced with a cultivator who was stronger than him, had he ever been afraid? If he wanted to make himself strong and let Holy Dragon City laugh at everyone, he was destined to step on a road full of bumps and hardships. The opportunity was right in front of him, so how could he give up just like that? When Tangjin thought up to this point, he immediately took out his demonic war blade and pounced towards the pitch-black tunnel. With the assistance of the application, Tangjin could easily see the scenery in the dark. Therefore, the debris on the ground did not pose any obstruction to him. It was just that the length of this tunnel was really too shocking. Tangjin had walked for a kilometer, yet he still had not reached the end. Just as Tangjin was sizing up a tightly shut metal door, a change suddenly occurred. A strange snake that was flickering with fluorescent lights suddenly shot out from the trash and headed straight for Tangjin's throat. This monster's movements were as fast as lightning. Tangjin only saw a flash of light before the monster had already pounced in front of him. Tangjin's heart jolted. He fiercely swung the demonic blade in his hand and dodged the sneak attack of the strange snake. Ding! Ding! The incomparably sharp demon blade struck the snake-like monster's body, producing a metallic sound and sparks. Tangjin frowned. It seemed that this monster did not have a body of flesh and blood. After being sent flying by Jin Tang's attack, the monster did not immediately attack. Instead, it stood up on the ground and stared at Jin Tang. Tangjin took this opportunity to finally see the appearance of the monster. It was a strange snake covered in black metal. There was a fluorescent ring on its body at a certain distance, arranged evenly from head to tail. At this moment, the triangular head of the strange metal snake, which was covered in metal plates, was facing Tangjin's direction. Its pair of eyes that were flashing with a red glow shot out a cold light that wanted to devour people. As long as Tangjin revealed a slight opening, this strange metal snake would launch an attack. After the previous exchange, Tangjin could already confirm that this was a Lord-tier monster that was not inferior to him in strength. He did not expect that he would encounter such a terrifying monster the moment he entered the metallic remains. Tangjin had no doubt about Broly's encounter. Perhaps there were even more terrifying monsters hidden within the metal ruins. The most important thing right now was to get rid of this metallic snake as soon as possible and use it to help him level up. Carefully adjusting his breathing, Tangjin's mind moved as he took out the purple lightning short sword from his storage space. He believed that with the sharpness of the purple lightning short sword, he should be able to break through the strange snake's metal armor. The moment Tangjin changed his weapon, the strange metal snake shot out with all its might and attacked Tangjin once again. Good. Ups.at from n0/v/lbn/.co/m. Tangjin shouted loudly. The purple electric short sword in his hand was violently hacked toward the strange metal snake. At the same time, an almost transparent purple flame appeared in his hand. It was the upgraded, Raging Flames. In order to level up Flame Frenzy and Ice Edge Battle Armor, the number of heads that Tangjin had smashed at had made his heart ache for a few days. It was precisely this kind of upgrade that did not care about the cost that caused the two attack skills to be upgraded to an abnormal level, becoming one of Tangjin's hidden trump cards. After the upgrade, this was the first time Tangjin had used it in actual combat. The temperature of the flame had reached a terrifying 9,000 degrees. The moment it appeared, it roasted the dry objects in the surroundings, causing them to emit strange sounds. The strange metal snake clearly sensed the terror of the flame. It was about to pounce in front of Tangjin when it forcefully turned its body to the side. However, Tangjin had long been waiting for the strange metal snake. How could he let it escape so easily? The purple electric short sword cut through the snake's body and cut off a small piece of its armor. The burning left palm quickly grabbed at the snake's body. At this moment, Tang Jin had already unleashed his speed to the limit. Swish! A sound similar to a red-hot soldering iron being dipped in water rang out. At the same time Tang Jin's palm grabbed the strange metal snake's body, a stream of metal vapor overflowed from his hand. The body of the strange metal snake that was hidden under the armor was unable to resist the terrifying heat and was instantly burned to ashes. From where Tang Jin's palm was holding onto, the strange metal snake was split into two. The cut had already been completely carbonized. The front half of the strange metal snake was now less than a meter long, and it was rolling on the ground in pain. The moment raging flames, which had been continuously upgraded, was used, the strange metal snake was completely destroyed. The semi-transparent purple flame was quickly withdrawn. Although this flame was terrifying, it consumed a great amount of physical strength. With Tang Jin's current cultivation, he would not be able to endure for long. If he didn't kill the snake, he would be harmed instead. Tang Jin would definitely not let this fellow off. With a flick of his hand, the purple lightning short sword turned into a stream of light and shot out, directly nailing the strange metal snake 7 inches away. The strange metal snake was already seriously injured. Now that the purple lightning dagger had injured its vital parts, it struggled madly for a few times before dying. Letting out a long breath, Tang Jin walked to the front of the strange metal snake's corpse and pulled out the purple lightning short sword. After thinking for a moment, Tang Jin kept the corpse of the strange metal snake into his storage space. Looking at the sealed metal door beside him, Tang Jin walked forward and the purple flame appeared in his hand once again. He slashed at the metal door, and the sturdy door immediately turned into steam, revealing a large hole. After keeping the flame, Tang Jin walked in. This was a very empty room, and on the surface, it seemed to be empty. However, after Tang Jin walked around twice, he felt that there was definitely something hidden inside. Tang Jin clenched his fist and knocked on the wall that was wrapped with a soft material. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Tang Jin extended his finger that was covered in purple flames and gently slid a few times on the wall. Clang! Clang! The metal pieces that were cut off fell to the ground and were directly stored by Tang Jin into his storage space. A large black hole was revealed at the spot where his finger had cut. Tang Jin was a little speechless after he clearly saw the items within the cave. What the hell is this? The item that appeared in front of Tang Jin was a large pile of rotten junk that emitted a faint stench. These items might not have been like this in the first place, but they had rotted to this extent because they had been stored for too long. He thought that he had found something good, but in the end, he discovered a pile of junk after opening it. One could imagine the depression in Tang Jin's heart. Tang Jin, who was unwilling to give up, cut open another piece of the metal wall. In the end, what entered his eyes was actually the skeleton of a monster that still had some fur. Compared to the pile of unknown garbage just now, the smell of the skeleton cabinet was so bad that it could kill people. Tang Jin spat. At the same time, he gave up on the idea of continuing to open the wall cabinet. He guessed that this place should be a cold storage room with a storage function, which was why there were all kinds of things stuffed here. When the refrigeration equipment of the metal wreckage stopped working, the frozen items inside would definitely rot completely. It was just that in this way, Tang Jin, who wanted to have some gains, must continue to venture deeper. His original plan was that if he could find useful materials here, Tang Jin would be able to evacuate. Unfortunately, the heavens did not grant him his wish, and he did not find anything here. Now, it seemed that going deep into the ruins was inevitable. However, if he were to encounter a Lord-tier monster that was even more terrifying than the metal snake, what should he do? After pondering for a moment, Tang Jin took a large step forward and continued to head deeper into the tunnel. The more he thought about it, the more he had to worry. He might as well not think about it and just take it one step at a time. As the saying goes, what you fear will come true. Tangjin saw a metal door blocking his way. When he was about to reach the end of the passage, two monsters appeared in front of him. This time, the monster was very similar to a rat. Its body was also covered with black metal armor, protecting all its vital points. What was even more freakish was that the two metal rats were the size of hounds, and their large flat teeth had turned into sharp knife-like teeth. The hard metal floor was bitten by the rat, and a huge hole was dug out. He really had an iron mouth and steel teeth, and was abnormally fierce. Facing two Lord-tier monsters, Tangjin didn't dare to let his guard down. The purple lightning short sword was placed horizontally in front of his chest in a defensive posture. Squeak, squeak. The two Lord-tier rats looked at each other. Their blood-red eyes widened as they pounced at Jin Tang. As the metal rat pounced with too much force, it left clear claw marks on the metal floor. When he saw the two metal rats coming at him, Tangjin violently waved the purple lightning short sword in his hand and directly charged toward one of the rats. The other hand used the same trick again, and an invisible purple flame surged up from the fingertips. Mouse, whose body was covered in metal armor, instantly pounced in front of Tangjin. He used both his mouth and legs to attack Tangjin's vital parts. The metal rat did not pay any attention to the purple lightning short sword in Tangjin's hand. In the metal rat's mind, cold weapons could not break through its armor at all, so it ignored them. Unfortunately, Tangjin's purple lightning short sword was not an ordinary cold weapon. Go to hell! Tangjin gave a loud roar. The speed of his purple lightning short sword swing actually increased by 1-fold as it ruthlessly cut into the metal rat's large mouth. GABA. The metal rat's teeth, which could easily tear the floor apart, were cut off by the purple lightning dagger. The purple electric short sword did not stop, and it cut a terrifying wound in the metal rat's mouth. After the broken teeth rat felt the pain, its body trembled violently, and it actually twisted its body in midair to escape. The other metal rat had an even more miserable fate. Just as it was about to bite Tangjin, Tangjin's left palm, which was emitting a translucent purple flame, had already ruthlessly grabbed at the metal rat's head. The metal rat was so frightened that its soul flew out of its body when it sensed the terrifying temperature on Tangjin's fingertip. It hurriedly tried to dodge. Unfortunately, Tangjin was destined not to give it the chance to escape. Just as the metal rat started to turn around, his 5 fingers had already ruthlessly inserted into the metal rat's head. The incomparably hard metal plate was as fragile as a piece of paper when it came into contact with the purple flames. It was easily pierced through by Tangjin. The metal rat let out a blood-curdling screech as the purple flames burned its head to ashes. Ding! A crisp sound was heard. The metal rat's brain had fallen to the ground. Seeing that its companion had been killed by Tangjin in a single strike, the metal rat whose mouth had been cut open by the purple lightning short sword turned around and ran. Monsters that had reached the Lord tier already had high intelligence and were very good at judging the situation. Seeing that it was not a match for Tangjin, this metal rat naturally would not stay behind and court death. You want to run? Dream on! Tangjin coldly snorted. The purple lightning short sword flew out once again and directly stabbed toward the back of the metal rat. As a Lord-tier monster, the metal rat's perception was extremely sensitive. Just as the purple electric dagger was about to hit it, it jumped up from its original spot and dodged the fatal blow. Discover new stories at nv/lbin.c/o. After landing on the ground, this fellow actually issued a provocative cry towards Tangjin. He seemed to be extremely pleased with himself. However, its jagged front teeth, which had been cut off by the purple lightning dagger, and its bloody mouth made it look extremely pathetic and ridiculous. When Tangjin saw this, he casually took out the demonic bow from his storage space and shot an arrow at the metal rat. The metal rat was shocked. It quickly squeaked and crawled into a metal hole in the wall. In reality, Tangjin had only shot out an ordinary wolf fang arrow. It was simply unable to penetrate the metal rat's abnormal armor. However, the metal rat had mistakenly thought that it was a terrifying weapon like the purple electric short sword, which was why it had fled in such a sorry state. Although the metal rat had entered the rat hole, Tangjin did not intend to let this fellow off. He used the purple flame to draw a line on the metal wall, revealing a passage that was wide enough for an adult to pass through. Tangjin sized him up for a moment before walking in. Behind the mouse hole was a large space, but it was empty at the moment. He wondered where the metal mouse had gone. Fortunately, Tangjin had some assistance. He swept his gaze across the ground and a row of rat footprints with heat residue appeared in his field of vision. Tangjin hurriedly gave chase when he saw the rat's footprints extending into the depths of the space. This space was also slanted downwards. Tangjin chased for about 2 kilometers before he suddenly saw a strange object that was about 12 meters long appear in front of him. Tangjin curiously walked in front of this object and carefully observed it. It was just that the more Tangjin looked at this thing, the more he felt that it was a flying device. Forget it, I'll put it in my storage space first and study it in detail when I return to Holy Dragon City. The most important thing at the moment was to see where the dead rat had sneaked to. The reason why Tangjin was so persistent in chasing after this metal rat was because he had actually carefully considered it. His first choice was that the metal rat could help him level up after he killed it. After killing the metal rat and the Lord Tier water monster that he had killed before, his level up progress had reached more than half. After this, he only needed to kill 4 more Lord Tier monsters to become a 2-star Lord Tier monster. With the strength of a 2-star horde leader, he should be able to go even further in this metallic ruins. Furthermore, the metal rat was cunning and cherished its life. Once it saw that something was wrong, it would quickly escape. Therefore, the place where it usually moved was far away from the dangerous areas inside the ruins. Tangjin only needed to follow the metal rat's movement route and it would definitely be safer than barging in. After storing the aircraft-like object into his storage space, Tangjin glanced at the rat hole in front of him and rushed over once again. After using the purple flame to cut the metal wall open, Tangjin walked in. Compared to the huge space just now, the area here was much smaller. At most, it was only 5,000 square meters. However, in this space, there were metal boxes of different sizes scattered around. Many of them had been opened, and there was nothing inside. Looking at the gnawing marks on the box, he knew that it was definitely the work of the dead rat. Tangjin sized up his surroundings. He discovered an unopened metal box and walked over. After using purple flames to cut open the electronic lock on the box, a strange black combat suit was revealed, making Tangjin's eyes light up. He didn't know what material this combat suit was made of, but it had a strange touch to it. It felt very high-tech, and one could tell at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. After using Appraisal Eye to lock onto the combat suit, a set of data was quickly displayed. Turobo Special Femtometer Combat Suit, specially designed for ground special forces. It can be used in all-terrain and all-weather battles, with long power and endurance. After seeing this set of simple identification data, Tangjin had already confirmed that this was a good thing that was hard to come by. To be able to possess the star-destroying cluster bombs and all sorts of high-tech items, the combat suit made by the Turobo people would definitely not be too bad. Although he really wanted to test the effects of this combat suit right now, the environment he was in was too dangerous. Tangjin still dispelled the thought of immediately testing it. Discover W stories on no/e/lbin.com. After putting the combat suit into his storage space, Tangjin continued to look for the traces of the metal rat. Tangjin had a faint feeling as he looked at the dirty and messy environment around him. This place might very well be the lair of the metal rat. Sure enough, Tangjin did not walk far before he saw a big bed made of broken battle suits in the middle of the messy box. The metal rat that was being chased by Tangjin was currently stretching its neck and looking at Tangjin with a dumbstruck expression. Tangjin saw an emotion called shock in the eyes of this metal rat. It clearly did not expect that Tangjin would actually chase him to its lair. Squeak! The metal rat suddenly jumped up from the big bed. After it furiously barked a few times at Tangjin, it turned its head and ran towards the corner of the wall. Where are you running to? Tangjin growled and used the purple lightning short sword as a flying knife again, shooting it toward the metal rat. The rat was about to enter the hole, but the speed of the purple lightning sword was far beyond its expectations. As a result, the purple lightning sword fell as soon as its butt entered the hole. Crack! Creak, 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 creak. The metal rat's shining tail had been cut off by the purple electric dagger, and only a small section less than 5 centimeters was left. If the purple electric short sword had moved a little bit further, the metal rat would have been killed. The metal rat flew into a rage after its beloved tail was cut off. It turned its head and stuck its head out of the hole, roaring continuously at Tangjin. However, after its teeth were cut off and its mouth was cut open, the metal rat looked extremely pathetic. Its threatening action at this moment caused Tangjin to feel that it was rather comical. He jumped to the entrance of the cave and slashed at it with his palm, which was covered in purple flames. The metal rat shrieked and immediately retreated, continuing to flee in a sorry state. Tangjin didn't hesitate either. After cutting the metal wall, he raised the purple lightning short sword and gave chase. According to the traces displayed on the application, Tangjin chased for another kilometer or so before the mouse's traces disappeared. He discovered that he was in a hall. The hall was very spacious, as if it was a giant conference room. There were many strangely shaped chairs placed in many places. Looking up, a huge and strange pattern came into view, and there was a line of familiar words below it. These words are the Trobo Expeditionary Fleet. After Tangjin saw these words, he roughly understood the origin of this metal ruins. The metal ruins used to be a super warship that belonged to the Torobo People's Expedition Fleet. The reason it appeared in the world of Luqing might have been because it had encountered an accident in the battle. As a result, it had plunged into the soil and was completely destroyed. Affected by the warship, the buildings near its crash site were instantly destroyed. Then, the destroyed battleship and the surrounding buildings were pulled into the world of towers by an unknown force, turning into this mysterious super ruin. This might be the origin of the super ruins. Tangjin felt that it should not be too different from the truth. A super warship would definitely have powerful weapons and high-tech items. The Fem combat suit that he had picked up was the most powerful proof. Since he had taken the risk to enter this place, he had to bring back some good things. When he thought of this, Tangjin was no longer in a hurry to catch the dead rat. Instead, he continuously used the appraisal eye to scan the items that were useful to him. Special combat wrist guard for the Torobo Expeditionary Fleet, built-in mini optical computer, needs to be cracked to use. This thing is not bad, keep it. Torobo Expeditionary Fleet anti-gravity mini detector, should be useful, put it away. The Torobo Expeditionary Fleet plasma grenade was actually a weapon, he had to take it away. Tangjin continued to walk around the hall and picked up more and more items. Just as he was happily picking them up, a wave of messy footsteps sounded, causing Tangjin's heart to be startled. He turned around and saw a rat with a broken front tooth running out of the dark tunnel. It was the metal rat that had been chased by Tangjin and had returned. When this fellow passed by Tangjin, he actually turned his head and revealed a pleased expression. He wagged his tail that only had a section left and had an expression that said "You're dead." Tangjin's heart suddenly trembled when he saw the expression of this dead rat. He did not hesitate to wildly run back the way he came from. This damn rat. I can't believe it would do this. I've really underestimated it. The metal rat looked at Tang Jin's back in a daze with a dumbstruck expression. When it discovered that Tang Jin had actually fled without the slightest hesitation and had even headed straight for its lair, it was so angry that it jumped up from the ground and continuously let out a wild cry. Squeak! After letting out a few angry roars, the rat turned its head and looked at the pitch-black tunnel. Its entire body trembled as it desperately chased after Tang Jin. Just as the man and hamster disappeared, a tall figure slowly walked out of the passage. He was about 2.5 meters tall, wearing a smooth-looking armor and holding a huge sword in his hand. Under the helmet that had been taken off was a gray-white face covered in scars, the color of a corpse. A pair of gloomy and cold eyes that flickered with a green light was staring intently at the direction where Tang Jin had disappeared. His eyes were filled with the desire to kill. A terrifying aura that far surpassed Tang Jin's cultivation continued to spread from its body, causing one to shiver. "Two damn rats, go and clean them up." Following his command, the two metal balls that were continuously swimming behind him immediately chased in the direction that Tang Jin had disappeared in. Well, truckers, that's all for this part. See you all in the next video.